Tonight we're going to have a very exciting program. I telephoned Gary Null, who does programs on health and healing. He's an activist, political activist too, and environmentalist, and an athlete, and a whole lot of other things. And we were going to talk about his new book called Nutrition and the Mind. And I was ready to talk about nutrition and the mind. But Gary Null just took off, and he delivered a blistering and inspired diatribe on our culture, our way of life, and ignorance and courage and the World Bank and fascism and Council on Foreign Relations and the pharmaceutical monopoly and the paradigm, starting off with back in the 1960s, something that us old people who were alive then remember with our parents, because we were not just working against, fighting for peace, or fighting against the Vietnam War, or demonstrating against the Vietnam War for LBJ or Richard Nixon, but our parents, so the parental generation, just couldn't, in many cases, not all, but just couldn't get it. Liberal Democrats just couldn't understand. And there was like this wall across which communication will not travel. Not rationality, not passion, not facts, not history, not values, nothing. And working from that wall, well, Michael Parenti, I got his picture here in front of me. Michael's been doing it too. but Gary Null has been banging against that wall for decades, working to tear down the wall. And it's quite an amazing story. Immense amount of energy and concentration, and passion that he has brought to bear against that wall, higher, stronger, wider than the Berlin Wall. And taking off from there, he analyzes the paradigm of our society and the need for us to, as Gertrude Stein would say, pioneer. Anyway, Gary Null, taking advantage of the incredible luxury we have on Something's Happening, the west of radio programs, where we have broad expanses, talked for nearly 3 hours. And I was, along with those of you who follow the rules of the program and listen every night, all night, and so you don't bug me with things that you missed and blame me for it. You sat rapt, and I sat rapt in attention at Gary Null's fantastic diatribe for a new paradigm. And now Pacifica wants the program because they've been getting phone calls all day, and I'm going to have to edit and deliver the tape to Pacifica. And I was thinking, gee, I would just love to play this program for the early audience, and I would really love to play this program for the Wednesday night audience. Thinking that, I won't, because I'm expecting Dave Emery and Michael Parenti, but maybe another time. Well, anyway, then I got a call from Archive saying that there will be no talk today from Dave due to technological screw-up. And I thought, well, the goddess has cleared the way, and you are about to embark on one of the highlights, most exciting interviews, if you can call it an interview, that I've ever had, with a very passionate Gary Null. And you will hear me very innocently preparing for a 1-hour interview on the subject of nutrition and the mind. And Gary Null takes off. So we take you now back 21 hours ago, as Roy of Hollywood innocently dials the telephone and prepares for a 60-minute interview with Gary Null on the subject of nutrition and the mind, his new book. KPFK Los Angeles. You are listening to KPFK Los Angeles, non-commercial listener-sponsored Pacifica Radio for all of Southern and parts of Central California. We've had many Gary Null programs on Something's Happening over the years, but we've never had him on live. And actually, we've never even discussed Gary Null's background. And we're going to break those two traditions. We're going to break those habits right now because we have Gary Null on the telephone live as of May 10th, 1995. And he's going to talk to us about his very profoundly important book, Nutrition and the Mind. Nutritionist Gary Null is one of America's leading health and fitness advocates, an award-winning investigative journalist and environmentalist. He's also an athlete with over 75 national track and field gold medals to his credit. He has testified on health issues before the U.S. Congress and features alternative health practitioners on his one-hour radio program, which is broadcast nationally from WBAI. His many books include The Complete Guide to Sensible Eating, Healing Your Body Naturally, Alternative Treatments to Illness, Reversing the Aging Process Naturally, and Black Hollywood. A frequent lecturer at universities and to organizations across the country on health, nutrition, and related topics, Dr. Null also hosts his own Saturday evening health and nutrition radio program in New York City. He was formerly the health commentator for both 9 Broadcast Plaza on WOR-TV and the WABC radio network. Founder of the Natural Living Walking and Running Club, Dr. Null has trained over 10,000 runners and walkers. In 1992, Null was both MAC Master Championship Track and Field Athlete of the Year and MAC Grand Prize Indoor Champion. He's both founder and director of the Health and Nutrition Certificate Program at the Pratt Institute and the School of Visual Arts, and in 1994 he received the Metropolitan Athletics Congress's Outstanding Achievement Award. So there is some credentials, and as we look at nutrition in the mind, this is not all from Gary Null, but he did a lot of research. Hopefully everything's working. Hello, Gary.
Hi.
Okay, you're on live at KPFK, and it's a great pleasure to talk to you directly.
Thank you.
Also, this is a very profoundly important book that I desperately wish I had about 20 or 30 years ago. It would have made my life completely different, completely better. Nutrition in the mind affects a lot of people. The conditions that you discuss affect a large segment of the American population.
What I tried to do, and what I like to focus attention on, maybe we can just start at this point, is looking at one of the mistakes that we have made, and by understanding and being honest about our mistakes, we're able to change and to grow. When I was growing up, and when I was a part of the anti-war movement back in into the 60s and into the 70s, I couldn't figure out why I was not able to convince my parents and friends in the small community that I grew up in West Virginia that this was a wrong policy that we were following. That if they looked deeper than what they were told, if they challenged their belief systems, they would find that we shouldn't be in that war. My family looked at me in a understanding way and in a loving way that families do, and went right ahead doing the same thing they'd always done. And I just couldn't figure that out. I couldn't figure out, for instance, later how Nixon was elected to the largest landslide presidential election in history after Watergate. I couldn't understand a lot of the things. I couldn't understand how during the 1980s, when we had the go-go hotshots on Wall Street who were amassing enormous fortunes beyond anything that the average person would ever need in their life to give them a healthy and happy and prosperous lifestyle. And we couldn't wait in our culture to pick up the next Forbes or Business Week or Barron's and see who was worth another 100 or 200 million. We went from millionaires, ultimate millionaires, to billionaires. And suddenly I saw people like Soros, the arbiter, and others who made a lot of money being invited in to be a part of Council on Foreign Relations and Trilateral Commission. These are organizations that meet and decide the policies by which we are all directed, right or wrong. They're not elected. We don't give them our permission, but that's part of what they consider their agenda. I couldn't understand, well, gee whiz, isn't it more important to ask what happened to everyone else when you made your money? Did anyone else lose money? Was anyone's lives adversely affected? You have a gentleman out there in California named Michael Milken. Michael Milken was the most successful junk bond distributor and manipulator in American history. When he was working, they made in excess of $1 billion during a 24-month period just for him. That was his amount of money. And yet it wasn't enough to make him stay honest. Now think of that for a moment. Let's put it in perspective. I'm going to show you how this connects. You give a person $1 billion. You make them the king of what they do, undisputedly the most powerful person on Wall Street at that time. And yet, $1 billion is not enough to keep them honest. We're still, from my perspective, no one asked, well, for you to make $1 billion, did anyone else lose $1 billion? Because generally it works that way. To the degree that one person profits and creates a profit, another person, it creates a debt. Most of what we have in our society is debt. We accumulate debt. But there's a whole lot of difference when you tell people, well, gee whiz, let's get into debt. Let's stay in debt, and then let's see the consequences of being in debt. But no one did. In my small town in West Virginia, there was a small glass factory. It had been a stable part of our economy there for almost 90 years. Members of my family worked in it. And I remember one time in the mid to late 80s getting a call just asking how people were doing back home. I live in New York City. And someone says, well, you know, they lost the job over there, and there's no pension fund left, and there's no retirement fund left, and gee whiz, all your uncle's going to have is just Social Security. And I thought, well, how's that possible? He's worked 45 years. Yes, well, you know, some New York Wall Street company took it over and stripped it of its assets and left all these workers here without anything. And I didn't see this written up in any of the financial publications, and that concerned me too. And I didn't understand how, when we took a really dispassionate, objective view, that during one 13-year period, from 1975 till 1988, more than 7 million Americans, 7 million, who had been gainfully employed, who had honored the American standards, who had not protested any war, who had elected their party, whatever their party line was, they went along with it, who had looked the other way with all the corruption, who had eaten the pesticides on their plants, and were told not to buy organic, and they didn't, who stayed away from doing any real exercise as they aged and acted their aged and got their constipation, their diverticulitis, their migraine headache, their high blood pressure, who overwhelmingly supported the medical-industrial complex by going obediently to their doctor. And if their doctor says, we've got to rush you in for coronary bypass operation. There was never a whimper, nor was there a challenge. Who would have babies delivered using stirrups to put women's legs in, as if somehow God had made a mistake and reversed the pull of gravity. All these people did exactly what they were conditioned and programmed to do without ever challenging it, and now they were being punished in the extreme. Some of these people were at a time in life where they had not bothered to have another career, nor another education, nor had they imbued themselves with any self-empowerment. And I watched this phenomena. I watched the phenomena of where, at one time in our society, we had people who were responsible one to another and who worked somewhat collectively together. Yes, there were separations. The banker was generally the one in church that gave a little more it was expected, but they still lived near you and socialized with you and went to summer picnics. Their kids went to school with you, and they just dressed more conservatively. But if you went into a bank in the 1940s and 50s in a community, you would get a loan based upon them knowing you and them growing up in the community with you. And they were understanding. These very same bankers, by the way, during the Depression, in some communities, including my own, would not foreclose on people's property. I know my aunt was one of the officers in the bank, and her bank did not foreclose on a single property because it was the policy of the man who ran the bank that he couldn't do this to his neighbors. It was just not, and from our community, it wasn't Christian. We were primarily Baptist. Well, now I started to see things shift. I started to see bankers giving $800 billion to despots and dictatorships in South American, Mexico is not in the last 65 years had a democracy. It's been an oligarchical government, utterly corrupt at every level, run by 35 families that control over 65% of the total resources of the country through their corporations and land holdings. I saw hundreds of billions of dollars going out of the country by Chemical and Bank and Chase Manhattan and the Rockefeller Group, never trickling down to the people. And I thought, gee whiz, here's the World Bank that everyone keeps acknowledging is so great, that was run for many years by Robert McNamara, the same person that is now coming back and acknowledging culpability in having allowed the massacre of innocents in Southeast Asia to the tune of 2.5 million, in America to the tune of 65,000 dead, 300,000 wounded, and hundreds of thousands more suffering post-traumatic shock syndrome and Agent Orange toxicity. And I saw all these people getting countries lining up, smiling, getting favored contracts to build hydroelectric dams in rainforests where there was no need and no population concentration to justify it. Swiss companies, American companies, you've got one right out there, that were the primary recipients of those monies because the construction engineering companies would always be first at the company trough. So a $2 billion grant to Brazil, well, first you had to get rid of the natives. So I was down there when they would go over in helicopters and throw poison food bags to the natives to kill them that way. Then gunships had simply killed them. This was known, and yet it didn't affect our foreign policy because our foreign policy had long been dictated along with our defense policy to protect the interests of those who were strong enough to maintain control over the most prime pieces of real estate, therefore exercising our sovereignty over other people. And yet the poor people who never saw anything that benefited them from a nickel of World Trade Organization or the World Bank Organization, I never saw a nickel going to the average person. There was no Keynesian logic here. The trickle-down stopped at the toppest level. The richest people in any country always ended up in the position to own all the land, and we helped them, and then to take over what would have been important land that had provided subsistence farming for thousands of indigenous people, and now they were made to sacrifice and live on the sides of hill and where there was erosion, because their fields had to go for cocoa, sugar, tobacco, cotton, cash export crops. But the country didn't benefit the cash export. The holding companies that were frequently either co-owned or fully American-owned were the ones that got the money from this cash export. So they got it both ways. Very unique, very clever. It was written up all the time, but only the positive side. Corporations making enormous amounts of money, CEOs making even more money, irrespective of what their employees made. There was no trickle down in the corporations, no real sharing of the wealth. And no one said, gee whiz, is it right to exploit people and resources, to pollute their resources? Is it right to honor people who have dishonored every spiritual, emotional, and humanitarian virtue? And indeed, it must have been right, because 95% of the American population continued to support it. I thought it was amazing when I saw film Rollerball. Rollerball was one of those films like Fahrenheit 451.
One of my favorite films.
And I saw these films in the 1970s, and you couldn't believe that these would be futuristic, that or I should say prophetic, because a society that had become so bored, so jaded, that sports had needed to become violent to keep the people's adrenaline fix going. The rush had to be stimulated. And so when I saw that film, I remember at the time thinking, I wonder if we will become so jaded and so bored as a society, with an overwhelming propensity for services to manipulate our every want and need, that we'll become this kind of passive, angry spectators, like the spectators in an arena, gladiator arena. Well, then later I started seeing roller derby get meaner and meaner. And I started to see one day when I turned on television late at night when I took a break from my writing, and it was not only roller derby, but they were knocking people off the roller derby track into water that had alligators. And I thought, well, that's different. Gee whiz. Wonder who's getting a kick out of this. And then I started seeing these Hercules shows and muscle-bound, hormone-bound, steroid-bound men and women, doing gladiator shows. And I started seeing television talk going from instructional, when I used to do it, to demeaning, where today every single show, Sally Jesse, the Geraldo, Montel, the Blake, what's her face, Oprah Winfrey, every one of these shows every day depicts the worst of human nature, and now it's confrontational, where the audience participates. I started seeing the media the same thing. And then one day, after I'd finished almost 15 years of in-depth research on the Kennedy assassination, and I saw that there were over 700 books, some of them very scholarly, I went through the Warren Commission in detail, and you could drive a truck through the discrepancies in the Warren Commission. And then I turned on television, and I thought near the Kennedy, the celebration of the Kennedy assassination, Dan Rather, Tom Brokaw, Connie Chung, all these people who the masses rely upon for their information, not one of them had either the decency, the honesty, the sense of curiosity, if nothing else, to challenge the Warren Commission. I saw people that no one was challenging, like Arlen Specter, now running for president, who was the creator of the single magic bullets phenomena.
And he's the liberal.
Well, liberal by some people's definition. And I saw bankers that wouldn't begin to go to your church or synagogue, wouldn't live in your neighborhood. I saw a society that was trying so hard to prove that it wasn't like anyone else. I saw movies go from 50 cents to $8, so that Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger and others who have monumental insecurity. How else could we talk about them needing that much money? When is enough? When do you have enough that you don't have to prove anything anymore? How many of their actions are based upon their insecurity and fear? And then that's going to cause more insecurity. I saw society gone crazy at every level. I saw the political apparatus so utterly corrupt. I saw the religious community so sanctimonious and manipulative. I saw the educational community subverting the ideal of the teacher, beginning to challenge during the 60s the quality of the curriculum, let alone how it was taught. I saw Wall Street raping the American people, creating astronomical debt that which we had absolutely no standard to which we could justify that debt. I saw in excess of $23 trillion. The national debt is only one part of it. It does not take into account credit card debt, which is equal to the national debt. It doesn't take into account other debt. Altogether, it's almost $23 trillion, and we do not have standards to justify it. I saw that when people woke up one day and said, gee whiz, we finally own our house, and I thought, you don't own anything. Oh, yeah, we do, Gary. We worked so hard. We trusted the American dream. We did exactly like we were conditioned and manipulated to do. When we got out of college, we stopped growing. When we got out of high school, we stopped growing. We stopped having fun in a meaningful and healthy way. We stopped really learning. We put it on automatic record, and we got our family immediately. We got into debt immediately. We bought our house immediately. We began to protect with our egos the 2,250 square feet that we would spend the rest of our life at. We began to honor the idea of permanency. And I said, you think you own it? Well, what happens if you don't pay your property taxes? Well, yeah, they come and take it away. Well, then who owns it if they can take it away? Well, I hadn't thought about that. Who owns your car if you don't get a sticker? You paid for it. Who owns it? I hadn't thought about that. Well, but I own my company. All right, don't pay your sales tax. Don't pay your FICA withholding tax. Who owns it? You don't own anything. You have the right to use something. Well, there's a group of people in our society that didn't get all crazy. They kind of stayed where they were, and today they don't have the debt that everyone else has. And when I saw bankers becoming multi-millionaires using other people's money, and gee whiz, they had it right. They were right. They could create, one bank alone, Citibank, could create in excess of $5 billion in debt, and all the other banks lined up to create debt in excess of $230 billion, and we paid for it. The savings and loan, including the recent former head of the Secretary, Benson, he had 3 savings loans that failed him and his son, and they lost all that money, and everyone bailed them out, and that wasn't brought up at his confirmation hearings. And we had renegade CIA operations running Mina Airport scams all over the country, over 30 of them. And I started seeing all this stuff, and I thought, well, isn't it interesting? We become ultra-violent. We become one of the most violent nations in history. We invade the sovereignty of other countries. But we did do something good. We absolutely cleaned up all drugs in Panama, right? And to make sure that we would get it all out, we went in there and we took all of our thousands of troops in. We killed 5,100 Panamanians, poor ones, in a ghetto and leveled it. We didn't bother the middle class because they were part of what was necessary to run the government. We instilled our appointed people. Of course, we made them seem like they were elected. Well, today you've got more drugs in Panama than you ever had before the man who we supported and kept in power for all those years, Noriega. But it was necessary to win an election. We have violated every human right there is. We support every dictatorship. I'm appalled when he goes to Russia yesterday, when one of the most violent people, one of the most violent despots in world history, who is supposed to have overcome fascism, is supporting fascism. Look at Chechnya, and look at Muslims in Chechnya. That is an ethnic cleansing. And then I look around the world, and I try to find a country where there is not a group trying to kill another group. And I look at 1 million people dead in Rwanda. And I remember back when we protested apartheid in South Africa, before there was photo opportunities to get your picture taken so you could use it at election time, having been arrested, of course, immediately released, but that was outside the camera range. But you could say you supported apartheid because you needed the black voters, because suddenly black became important and no longer invisible at election time. And I actually found blacks who, in America, when I was writing my research, working in Harlem every day for 7 years, who had not become compromised and become white. But a lot did. And a lot lost their passion and their energy. And a lot of whites lost their passion and energy, just like my parents. So when my mom got cancer, my dad got cancer, when my brother got cancer, when my aunts and uncles got cancer, living in one of the most polluted valleys in America, but nobody protested because you weren't allowed to. It wasn't expected for you. You weren't supposed to challenge authority. So no one ever challenged authority, and suddenly doctors began to believe that they actually knew something. In fact, they believed it so much that the mere hint that you would challenge their authority was enough to get them completely ballistic emotionally on you. And so people dutifully took their vaccines. Nobody asked, is there any scientific study that shows that this vaccine will protect me and do no harm? And there were none. No one bothered to actually do the research. It was based upon assumptions and very, very poor scientific work. And I remember them saying, well, Gary, you're one of these firebrands. And I said, I'm not a firebrand. I'm just a person that believes that if you're going to use the environment, you have some responsibility to keep it clean. And they said, you're not an authority. We'll hire authorities. And we believe in authorities. No one will ever believe you. And I thought, well, wouldn't common sense dictate that you should believe or not believe in something, not just their credentials? They said, you're kind of stupid, Gary. We've never believed in just good in this country because good has never won out. We like to use that because we like to give false platitudes to people and false ideals to people. That way they won't get cynical and bitter. And we can continue to manipulate them, and they'll continue to support us. Watch how we do it. And I said, well, you can't do that. And they said, sure you can. So they gave chemotherapy, and dead bodies piled up one upon another, 625,000 this year alone, and far more than what they're curing, because they're curing 50.1%. But 40 years ago, it was 49.9%. They've only increased the percentage of actual cures, survival 5 years, 1/10 of 1%. And so I started looking at all this, and I said, well, no, I'll just present the other side and show that we get breast cancer not because of genetics and not because of viruses. We don't even have AIDS because of viruses. But it's no longer one doctor at UCLA saying this who was ostracized and lost his research grants, National Institutes of Health. There are 500 doctors and Nobel laureates saying that now. You can't keep all this information. Well, sure you can, Gary. You could have 1 million people on your side. You could have reason. You could have logic. You could have values on your side, and no one will pay attention to you because no one can challenge the status quo. So when I said, look, here is what some researchers did. They took all the chemotherapy experiments and treatments in every one of the major studies in the world for the past 30 years, and they reviewed them meticulously. It took them several years to do, and they found that chemotherapy has not worked, has not improved the quality or length of life, actually has shortened it and caused 25% of the secondary cancers. It simply doesn't work. The basic concept of the war on people's diseases is fundamentally flawed. Therefore, everything that you do beyond that fundamental flaw itself will be flawed, and you'll have consequences to pay. But the nice thing about being wrong is if you write the rules on how a person should perceive wrong, you become right. Example, if you make women a disease, then no matter what you do to them, you can't be held accountable. So if you give 45 million women Valium from
from 1960s through the 1990s because they're telling you they have migraine headaches or candida or mood swings or intermittent pains, you can say after a cursory exam, sorry, honey, it's all in your brain. Go home and take some Valium. Now, the very same women who are in a majority of 63% of the voters have not yet passed an ERA nationally are going to go home and take the Valium. Those women who decide for themselves and break their paradigm hold, who get out of the straitjacket of control by authority, will say, first, I ain't your honey. Secondly, it's my body. Third, I know what my body feels like, and I don't need some jerk like you trying to tell me how I should take something to dull my wit so I can become chemically lobotomized, so I don't become a threat to your male or female ego. And the woman is equally as culpable, because for a woman to be a very successful physician, she must first become a man. And that's why so many top gynecologists are more utterly ruthless than many of the males. They got to show, hey, Buster, don't shine a negative light on me. I'm in your club. But what about the women like Dr. Janice Keller Phelps, who exudes spiritual feminism, independence of thought, and self-empowerment for women? She loses her license to practice medicine. Every one of 1,000 women and men who decide that what they have done as obstetricians, gynecologists, psychiatrists, chemically lobotomizing people, giving them grand mal seizures with electroconvulsive therapy, shocking their brains so that they permanently forget something, some nice way to deal with the symptom. Yes, our medical paradigm, and we will justify it, first we'll give them ice pick lobotomies, and we'll just destroy these temporal lobes, and hey, they're not going to be out of control anymore. Well, what if they really weren't out of control? What if they were just angry or concerned about the wrongs in society? Well, was Walter Cronkite angry? If he's not angry and he's the way it is, then why should you be? After all, we've got these people out there who are highly respected journalists, philosophers, religious leaders, and politicians, and if there was something fundamentally wrong, wouldn't they have changed it? If there were conspiracies, wouldn't they have exposed them? There are no conspiracies. Look at Lee Harvey Oswald. Look at Sirhan. Look at James Earl Ray. They didn't act with anyone else, did they? Gee whiz. If you're one of those people like Robert Baer Kaiser, who wrote RFK Must Die, RFK Must Die, RFK Must Die, and find that Sirhan was under hypnosis, well, too bad for you. If you're one of these people who believe the same FBI wouldn't do anything untenable, then you have to deny COINTEL and all the other black bag operations, including their desire to see Martin Luther King dead, enough that they blackmailed him by taping his phone conversations and suggesting suicide. And you think, well, who's crazy here? Am I crazy for challenging virtually every institution for being wrong and corrupt and misguided? Am I wrong for wanting to challenge authority, which has been consistently wrong, that has not given us cures in medicine for arthritis, something that's simple? And yet when a doctor who has 3 board certifications, who's a professor, who in Norwalk, Connecticut, can cure 85% of his arthritic patients by simply changing their diet and getting them off foods they're allergic to, Dr. Marshall Mandel, and they harass him? Am I crazy when approximately 1,000 doctors, that's less than 1/6 of 1%, who have gone beyond their orthodox trainings, have broken through the paradigm, who have sought to see that there is a larger way of looking at humanity, have not stopped at the needlessly repetitive and self-serving interest of the old educational paradigm that discouraged and disallowed the right brain, that kept the right brain and the right heart out of medical school and allowed only the left brain in. And we wonder why there's no bedside mannerisms, there's no care and compassion, there's no integrated concepts of how the whole body works, that there's not even a mind-body connection, that there's a whole field of psychoneuroimmunology that denies itself. a very same scientific community that will create over 100,000 studies showing that nutrition plays a role in all your behavior, that everything from vitamin B6 deficiency to iodine deficiency can lead to depression, and when you correct the iodine and correct the thyroid, that you're no longer depressed. And yet the science that shows this exists is not transferred into clinical application, that there is a schism, a black hole that all this scientific knowledge goes into, that you can have 300 articles on garlic lowering your blood pressure, garlic lowering your cholesterol, and yet you will not have doctors using garlic, but a medication that has side effects including impotency, that when the average person starts taking Prozac as if it's a wonder pill, and one of the side effects of Prozac is depression, and a form of an echinacea, which is an inability to sit still, can't stand still. A society that has become so reliant upon its drugs and its fixes, that has no purpose, no dynamic, no direction, no cultural understanding, no sense of historical perspective, that's lost its depth of field, that 60% of all Americans stop reading and never read another book after high school, and only 10% of the population read more than one book a year, and that is not a non-fiction book. That where 75% of our information about our society comes from the media, and the very same Council on Foreign Relations members, who are all major members of the media, will never challenge whether or not we have a new world order, and yet when George Bush says we have a new world order and should be striving for such, and Henry Kissinger write about a new world order, then no one asks, well, what is this new world order? When we intentionally take the very same people that used to be our neighbors who now have selectively removed themselves because, after all, why else would you want to live in a neighborhood and dress differently, have different cars, and hang out with people who don't remind you of where you once were? Was it that bad? And now they work for companies to which are misbranding drugs and sending them overseas. And no one asks and says, hold on a second, you the receptionist, you the vice president of research, you the legal affairs director, you the CEO, you the stockholders of this company, is it right that we will ban a drug as being too toxic and too dangerous to use in the United States, or a pesticide, or a fungicide, and ship that over to innocent people in another country with no warnings, mislabeled, and allow them to take it in so that we can continue the commerce of creating debt? Well, yeah, Gary, that's just good business. Hey, you haven't seen anyone write that up in the New York Times as being a bad idea. Well, no, I forgot the head of the New York Times. He's one of those inside guys. Maybe it's me, but Hollywood's run by 1,300 insiders. I don't ever see any new faces, same old people making the same stupid films and exploiting the whole industry in the most ridiculous way. So, as I was saying, so what we have is when we take an honest look at everything in our society, and I mean everything, from the exploitation of the farm workers to the destruction of our inner cities, to the corruption that we tolerate, to the PAC groups electing people that they want in offices, to secret groups of over 400 insiders who are all connected with the medical pharmaceutical industry that create the Clinton health plan, and we're not told that these people are there. We're not given their names or dossiers or background, even though it's in violation of the federal laws about disclosure. When this cost us $11 million to find out that they wanted a program that would have taken away all of our rights and freedoms and created jails, fines, and confiscation of personal property if we used alternative therapies or therapies they chose not to allow us to use, then I have to say, well, then what kind of freedoms do we have anymore? And while I see all these erosions of freedom, when I see Americans becoming more and more violent, when I see more and more people losing their sense of why they're alive and character development and any sense of spiritual awareness, when I see anyone challenging any institution at any level then being excluded from that institution and its values, no matter what you had contributed before, like they did with Linus Pauling, making one of the greatest minds of all time seem as if he is a fool and calling him a dupe, and the people who, the 1,000 doctors who had made a difference, all being excluded now, no matter what their previous position, from any position of power or authority within the paradigm. And I start seeing that in every institution, those who challenge the institutional beliefs, those who challenge the authority, the absolute right of the paradigm to guide, are themselves excluded. So therefore, the people that we end up taking our signals from, our messages from, become the people that are all in the self-perpetuation mode. Research, most of the research in this... I just finished doing a review of 20,000 articles on menopause. 20,000. 99% of those articles, 99.9% of those articles told about estrogen replacement therapy. Why? Because the drugs companies were paying for the research. I only found 30 articles where natural treatments were considered. The peer review system itself excludes that which is natural as not, quote, worthy. I see science being flawed. I see the double-blind placebo-controlled trial being flawed because it doesn't take into account that your mind is an active process. So it doesn't take into account the reality of how healing exists. I see people not understanding the principles of health, thinking that anything that creates symptoms is a disease process, condition, but anything that is in the absence of symptoms and disease means well. That's the most ridiculous notion, yet that's what I see. I see that today we are losing 26% of our crops to pests, even though we're using 1,000 times more pesticides than we did in 1950, and no one's asking a fundamental question. Do we need pesticides if we've got more pests? And are they safe? Well, they're bad for us. They cause cancer, leukemia, and other diseases, and we're not even getting the benefit of having a reduction in crops. But it's a system that self-perpetuates. No system stops. The stockholders don't want to lose dividends because a company wants to be ethical. So companies know that the bottom line is more important than the ethics of how the money was created. We didn't challenge Michael Milken on how much money he made and the fact that he put innocent people in debt and caused many of them to lose their livelihoods. That's what he should have gone to jail for 25 million lifetimes. We just caused him to go to jail for a temporary period of time. That's unfortunate. That's really unfortunate. But he was a king. He was our royalty. Look at the people we look up to. Look at the people that we can't throw enough money at and power at. Look at the dysfunctional megalomaniacs that live in Hollywood, where there's no honesty or decency, where everything's a lie. Look at the people who don't care a whip about anyone except themselves. Actions are what tell me what someone's about, not their false platitudes. Look at the PAC groups who can get in to see any legislator in state and federal government, and yet you and I can't. Look whose interest is looked after consistently, not ours. Look at the health of our environment. Look at the medicines we're given as if there's no other option. And then try to challenge anyone in authority. See if you get a reasoned, compassionate person listening to see what they can learn from you in your arguments. Or do you get a flaming ego that's saying, how dare you challenge my territoriality? I happen to be a part of that academic community. You see, I decided to go back to school when they said, well, Gary, if you were only an expert, we'd pay attention to these issues. So I believed them. I honestly believed them. I'm from West Virginia. I'm from a farm. I believed. So I went back and got my dietetics background. I completed dietetics school, New York Institute of Dietetics. 4-point average, came out, and they said, well, you know, it's not enough to be a dietitian. I said, well, but you said so. Well, I know, but you got to go to get a regular college degree in this. So I went back and I'd already had my degrees in psychology, my BA, MA, and PhD. But they said, that doesn't count. That's psychology. That's nothing. So I went back and I got my BS from State University of New Jersey, and then I went on and I got my PhD from Union Graduate School, one of the hardest in the country to get into and out of. And then I got a PhD in human nutrition and public health science. 16 years in academia, graduate schools, thesis, research, became an Institute of Applied Biology research scientist. And no matter what I did, publishing peer-reviewed journals, research, original research, they would always have another excuse. And then one day I realized, gee whiz, hey fellas, this is really good. You told me that we only honor those who become authorities. Well, I became an authority, But then what you didn't tell me, and this is clever of you, is that we only believe the authorities who honor the paradigm. So if I sell my soul, so I make sure that I have all the annuities and all the worldly possessions and all the public support and all the peer support, then it doesn't matter how bad I am or how wrong my thinking, you will protect me. So if I killed every patient with chemotherapy, if I killed every patient that came to me, as long as I'm doing it with orthodoxy, I'll continue to be rewarded. Gee whiz, that's a great game. But if I cure, in the state of California, every patient, if I cure them of AIDS or cancer, I'll go to jail, like Dr. James Privateer, and work on the chain gang. That's a really interesting concept. And the media won't support me because the media, a journalist, is as much a victim of a paradigm belief as anyone else. I never figured that out. I spent my whole career thinking as long as you show what's wrong and then a positive option, people will automatically want to choose the positive option. I didn't know that we were all Manchurian candidates. I didn't know we were a nation of Stepford wives. Everyone is. And the people who are the smartest are the ones who know how to stay within the boundaries. As long as you smile and wave and keep to the paradigm, you are Teflon. You are proof that nothing bad's going to happen. Do good and you will be punished if the good challenges the paradigm. So what was really causing our headaches and what's causing our cancer and what's causing our breast cancer and our prostate cancer and our heart disease, what's causing our arteries to be clogged? Well, let me figure this out now. This is neat. This is really neat. The very system that tells us that in order to be healthy, we eat the basic 4 food group and to have our meat and our dairy and our pesticides on our food, that's 90% of all the disease. In other words, what we eat creates all of our disease. The water we drink with fluoride that doesn't help anyone, and every study shows that it doesn't help, but that's not important. We have to drink our fluoride, otherwise we are somehow we're anti. And boy, just the term we use, controversial, that's bad. Left, that's bad. Right, that's bad. Alternative, that's terrible. By the way, wasn't it the words, the very same words, quack, alternative, unscientific? Now, let me figure this out here. I think I got this. Back in the 1930s, weren't those the same terms that were handed down by the German scientific community to any of the Jewish scientists so that they could then show that these people could be held accountable and therefore excluded from being considered scientific or a doctor? And weren't they excluded from being able to practice any medicine by an act that was passed in 1933? I think that was. Yeah, it was. So I see. So the Nazis then used the term in 1933, pseudoscience, and any Jewish physician or scientist was then considered pseudoscience because they were using disciplinary state boards in Germany to reinforce the tyranny of, quote, scientific anti-Semitism.
Well, I should add, in the United States, the reason we have Jewish hospitals here is because Jewish doctors were not allowed to be residents at hospitals until the 1940s in the United States.
Well, nothing has changed. We have $80 billion a year in pure fraud, $130 billion in semi-fraud unnecessary treatments, $70 billion in ineffective bureaucracy, $80 billion in overpricing and lack of cost management, $100+ billion in insufficient use of alternative and complementary therapies, $50 billion in FDA unnecessary actions. So what I'm seeing the very same prejudice that was used against an entire race to justify its attack and destruction has been used against every one of these 1,000 courageous doctors that is used against the American public. So any citizen who chose to become a vegetarian was considered a quack, a health nut. And therefore we had to relegate these people to getting no credibility. So if a doctor came up with a successful cancer treatment, a heart disease treatment, they would say, well, gee whiz, What you're doing is causing your disease. The American public and the media right behind them, all of these goose-stepping journalists, these little fascist journalists would step up and say, hold on a second, we're here to protect the status quo. If you tell us you have a treatment for cancer, the very first call we're going to make is to the American Cancer Society, a private organization that has over $500 million in personal assets and spends less than 5% of its budget on helping people with cancer, and that isn't real help. And we will call them and say, American Cancer Society, our high priest of information. This man says that using anti-neoplastins, Dr. Stanislaw Brzezinski, MD, PhD, Baylor College of Medicine, he says he can help people reverse their prognosis because he can reverse the differentiation of the cancer cell, turn it from a cancer cell into a non-cancer cell back into a normal cell. He has some studies to prove it, and he has a lot of patients with clinical evidence. The American Cancer Society says, hold on a second, let's go to our Unproven Cancer Management book. This is a black book, a black list book. Well, he's in there along with 131 other doctors, including Dr. Joseph Issels, Dr. Lawrence Burton, Dr. Virginia Livingston Wheeler, Dr. Emmanuel Rivisi, still practicing at 99 years of age. All of these doctors are quacks. Therefore, you cannot write about these because, as a journalist, you don't want to promote quackery. You're absolutely right. My God, what am I thinking about? I will not give this person any credibility, and when the state board comes to attack their license, I will pillar those people and make them seem as if they are unfit to be in our society. I will call them the butcher of Park Avenue. I will not focus on the fact that this great Jewish doctor spent 77 years of his practice without ever charging a patient a nickel, who helped people discover 11 major cures, major meaning a cure for cancer, a cure for AIDS, and he's got the living evidence to show it. But I won't do that. We'll keep it one-sided. We'll do the Connie Chung two-step, bad journalism, anything for a rating. And we will protect and honor our status quo that you have given us to continue being in a position of respect within our institution as journalists. We are the same journalists that will not challenge the RFK assassination. We'll leave it to the San Diego Bee or other papers, but remember, those aren't orthodox, are they? The Washington Post is orthodox, so don't expect to hear anything honest or legitimate that's going to challenge the status quo. Same with the New York Times. These people couldn't find a story if you went up and painted it on the side of their building. They have been punitive against, issued punitive editorials against everything within the alternative movement. So much so, it is so beautiful, it is so perfect. The fix has been so wonderfully orchestrated that anything that cures people is destroyed. Honesty becomes a fault. Dishonesty becomes a norm. Health becomes an anachronism to be detestable. Sickness becomes a birthright. Freedom becomes a burlesque. Tyranny of the spirit becomes something that we relish. And as a result, the very thing that causes dysfunction and disease, illiteracy and repression, fascistic notions, becomes the norm and is not only tolerated, it is embraced. So now, I get it. Get the people sick by giving them their basic 4 food group. Get them polluted by giving them chlorine, fluoride, cryptosporidium, chemical toxins. Then when they get sick, tell them that it was genetic, which it almost never is. Tell them that it was a virus because you had a virologist running our cancer program. And we love to see these self-serving people get up at the public trough because they can spend a lifetime, 10 lifetimes, studying something that doesn't cause cancer. And then we will treat them for the diseases we have caused, we, the larger collective society. Now, then we're going to give them ineffective treatments in 90% of the cases. That's the Office of Technology Assessment. We will give 51% of all the senior citizens that we warehouse like no other culture in the world because as you become older, you become less valuable in our society. So we will put you away. We will not honor your integrity, your knowledge, your wisdom, your capacity, your compassions for growth. We won't use your assets in a good way. We will be embarrassed by you. And we'll give you entitlements, but we don't want to hear from you, and we certainly don't want you bothering us. We'll give 51% of you 15 different drugs a day, almost all counterindicated, all of which could be negated if we gave you proper nutrition, but we can't do that. We'll give you institutional food. We'll give you antipsychotic medication, even though less than 0.5% have been shown to be psychotic, but no one will challenge that as bad medicine. We'll give you unnecessary coronary bypass operations by our own studies. 3 separate studies, 75, 55, and 35% are unnecessary and cause mortality, as much as 15% death at 65 years and over. It'll completely re-occlude your arteries, by the way, within a matter of years, but that won't be important. Remember, the medical paradigm works. Those who are in power rule, and you cannot challenge those who are in power because they don't give up their control, only to the next generation that they have trained. And so that's why succession is essential. Does it maintain the status quo? When a doctor like Julian Whitaker and a doctor like Weiner and the others in California, when they choose chelation therapy, we will attack them. The journalists will not come to their aid. The politicians will not come to their aid unless that journalist, unless that politician, through crisis of conscience, through crisis within their life, have peered through the existing limited belief system and said, you mean I can actually ask a question outside of the paradigm? You mean there are answers outside of my belief system? My God, why didn't I figure that out? Now, here I'm told that the more knowledge we have from education, the wiser we become. I didn't know that we could incorporate other people's knowledge. I didn't know we could use acupuncture and Tai Chi and Qigong and meditative techniques and farming techniques. I didn't know this. I didn't know Rudolf Steiner, who gave us biodiversity and other forms of hydrodynamic and interdynamic farming would be more ecologically sensible and nutritional. I didn't know that because I was told that it was controversial, and I don't do anything that's controversial. I don't accept anything. I don't want anyone next to me that's controversial. I don't want to participate in controversy.
I want to participate by saying at this point you're listening to KPFK Los Angeles, 90.7 FM, non-commercial listener-sponsored Pacifica Radio for all of Southern and parts of Central California. As of May 10th, 1995, we're talking with Gary Null live. And continue.
And so when I went to medical school and I said, excuse me, I have a question. Are you suggesting that depression is a deficiency of Valium, lithium, Prozac? Should we have naturally had this in our systems? Is that, shouldn't we be looking at deficiencies of magnesium? What do you mean? You're challenging me? You're challenging me? Since when did you become the head of this class? I'm the chairman of this department. No one challenges me. I'm unchallengeable. Now, you want to be a doctor. You want to get the rewards. You want to have the BMWs. You want to be able to have a lot of leisure time. You want to be able to do a lot of things and not be responsible for them. Then let me tell you something. You damn well better keep your mouth shut, learn, regurgitate exactly what you're told with no challenge to that. This is not about right brain holistic interpretations. This is an indoctrination process, and you will be the high priest of an indoctrinated society. People will look up to you. Now, you got that right. You stick your ideals in the Albert Schweitzer book, who was also a racist, you stick that back where it belongs, or you will be excluded. Do you get me? Now let me tell you the rules of the game. Anyone of your colleagues who decides to use chelation therapy is a quack. Do you understand the term? They are pseudoscientific. Do you understand what I'm saying? You will not, under any circumstances, use them for resources. If they are a chiropractor, you won't even go at a social gathering of them. If they are an herbalist, well, unfortunately, we don't burn people to death today at stakes, but we should now, shouldn't we, for promoting quackery and keeping people from unproven treatments? Well, hold on, before you throw me out of this class. Okay, I accept your ego extension, I accept your megalomania, I accept your insecurities, I accept all that. I accept the the small penis syndrome of medical orthodoxy, that everyone's stretching their stethoscope thinking that's the phallic extension symbol. I accept all this. I accept your need to be different. I accept your need to feather your ego. But something I have trouble accepting, you keep coming back to this concept that we've got to keep people protected from themselves because they're too dumb to know what's in their own best interest. So we have to keep them back to the proven. Now the media says keep them back to the proven. We say keep them back to the proven. A question, Herr Doctor. Can we show that what we're giving them is proven, beneficial, and better? We don't have a cure for arthritis. We're giving them gold injections. We're giving them steroids. We're giving them non-steroidal compounds. And we're giving them steroidal compounds. And they're getting worse overall. Their body's immune system is defective. 95% of the kids that we gave the measles vaccines, the full routine to, ended up with measles in a recent study. We're implanting people with attenuated and non-attenuated viruses, and it's not protective. When people get the flu vaccine, they frequently test positive for the HIV virus. You're telling me that the HIV virus is the cause of AIDS. Doctor, explain this to me, because I got to somehow justify this to my patients. You're telling me that a non-pathogenic retrovirus that has never been shown in history to be that strong creates an antibody response, and unlike any other virus, now that you have protective antibodies, it is now going to be the cause of your death, where we intentionally give people vaccines to create antibodies so it's protective of future disease, so they won't get that disease again because their body will recognize it from the antibodies we've given them. Now, are you turning science upside down for me? Are you telling me that a virus that has never been shown to cause AIDS, there's not a study in the literature that shows it causes 29 different symptoms, each one a separate disease that existed pre-AIDS, but in its previous form, we had it? Are you saying it causes all these things? How can you show me that HIV causes Kaposi's sarcoma? There's not a study in the world. Now, shouldn't we be looking at amyl nitrate and drug use? Should we be looking at multiple antibiotic use? What about the people? It hasn't broken out as a epidemic yet. It stayed in the same groups of people. And it's actually 700,000. We thought at this point it would be close to 10 million. Shouldn't we be re-examining our methodology and re-examining the science and re-examining the epidemiology? Shouldn't we be looking at what builds up the immune system? We don't have the cures. You're telling us keep people on the orthodox because the orthodox is where they get help. And doctors, show me where the orthodox is helping. Show me where the medicines are indicated for the conditions. I got to challenge you on this. Well, then leave the class. You're failed. Learn the lesson. Now, you go out there and you become a holistic, and we'll see that you're harassed. No research grants, no publication in peer-reviewed journals, no acceptance in the general media. Even your colleagues will become angry at you. No, that's not true. Look, if I'm able to help people, surely people will pay attention to that. You think so? Well, let's just try this. You go give them some other diet. You give them a vegetarian diet. And you get them off milk, and you clear up their asthma, and you clear up their mucus, and you clear up their gastrointestinal disturbances. You get them off gluten and wheat, and you start clearing up celiac and Crohn's disease. And you start giving them glutathione and build up their natural immune modulators. Give them vitamin C at high doses 5 times a day and see how their free radicals diminish. And so they don't have cancer in the same incidence. Give them phytochemicals, the indoles and natural estrogenic compounds in soy that help prevent breast cancer and prostate cancer. Give them juices and chlorophyll to detoxify their liver and their kidneys and purify their blood. Give them quercetin to stop the bleeding of their gums, and give them magnesium, which can cause their muscles to relax, and give them ginkgo to improve their memory. Give them all the things that you want to give them. Give them cabbage juice to cure their ulcers. Give them astragalus, will help their sore throat. Give them beta-carotene in high doses, and vitamin E, which helps intermittent claudication and antithrombotic affects their blood less likely to clot and cause a stroke. give them all these things, and you will stop their disease, yes, but you will not be rewarded. You'll be punished. We will make a dietitian the only one by law allowed to give information out, even for free. You will go to jail or lose your worldly possessions if you have a PhD and you're in a state like Ohio or Alabama that says that only a dietitian, a person who does not have an academic degree, that is not a scientific basis to it, that learns how to give hospital food that killed 50,000 people per year in hospitals, 50,000 dead. They will be the only ones allowed to give this information because they didn't do something that you have had the pure ignorance to do. They kept with the status quo. You're trying to make an argument for body-mind. We'll relegate that to New Age. The very concept of New Age will exclude it from serious consideration. You'll believe in the sixth sense. We'll disconsider that real quick. You'll believe in intuition. We don't use that in medicine or science. It's not provable. You will heal people, but we'll make sure that your healing is negated. You think you'll have power of the media, power of the educational system? Look whose book is taught in dietetic school, medical school. Not yours, ours. You may make a few little toe holes here and there, but remember, the mass of people ate jelly beans in the largest amount in history when Reagan was in office. They follow the leader. The leader of a paradigm is who dictates the direction of our conscious. If the person running a paradigm is themselves a believer in orthodoxy that is self-limiting, even well-intentioned, they will continue to promote the orthodoxy. That is their first caveat. So you see, Gary, you lose. You've always lost, and you always will. You haven't learned. We hold the keys to the kingdom. You can have all the science. You can have all the clinical application. We will show you how easy it is to turn public opinion upside down. You will bring forth a group of people who have been successfully treated with AIDS. You'll do a documentary around it called Living with AIDS Naturally. Try to get that on PBS. You won't. PBS is orthodox, even as an extension of what is supposed to be an alternative broadcasting system. After all, we've got Bill Moyers, and he's our pseudo-alternative. We will never take people to a depth that we cannot control the outcome. If there's anything to be used that improves their life, we must control it. Look what we did for granola. Now, mind you, granola has the sugar, and granola has the pesticides, and granola has the preservatives. But see, we took a 60s concept and we profited from it. As long as we can have a proprietary interest in something, then we'll see it's promoted. We want a cure for cancer, Gary. Don't you think our sons and daughters get cancer? They do. But we want it to be our cure, not yours. We also don't like the idea of this egalitarian concept. If we were really interested in rights, we'd be looking at the consequences of what we create. Do you see anybody looking at the consequences of what we create? If you do, you're automatically put on the outside. And from the outside, nothing changes. You can holler, we'll give you Mother Jones. Who cares? No one in orthodoxy reads it. The general media won't quote it. You can't get anyone to pay attention to it. Appear on one of our radio shows and we'll attack it. You can investigate and publish in the Village Voice, Waco, the true story of how when they approached the house, they didn't even have the search warrant. And the media and the American public won't even ask. Did it require 5 months of rehearsal with hundreds of individuals using U.S. military bases, a violation of constitutional provisions, to use the United States Armed Forces against its own citizenry? That's a violation of our constitutional guarantees. To serve a search warrant? And they didn't even have the search warrant? and they went in with an overhead helicopter and fired down into the houses. When people were in their church that morning and eating breakfast, bullets went through their skull and came out their body. Now, you'll expose that, but I promise you, Gary, none of the media is going to focus on it. And we planted listening devices in the house, and we had infrared cameras, so we saw and heard everything. We knew that these people were out of water. We knew they were out of food. We knew that they were coming out within 24 hours. And yet that morning at 5:35 a.m., we called the hospital in Dallas and said, prepare for major burn bed unit. How many beds do you have available? And we now saw for the first time the stairwells being knocked out, so people were not able to escape. And we used a gas that had been banned by the Geneva Convention, that you would be found guilty if you used it in a war, violating human rights. And we used that gas at the highest concentrations with ethanol, creating hydrogen cyanide that was in the autopsy reports. Every one of those people died of hydrogen cyanide. Gary, don't you get it? In order to save the kids, we had to kill them. Don't you understand that we can get away with that? That's because we're in power. We create the rules of the paradigm, and no one will challenge it. And if they do, we'll call them a radical left and a radical right. And we'll call them subversive, and we'll call them anarchist, and we'll call them discontent. And when they start looking at anything else we've done, we'll say, well, don't write about them. After all, they're the radical right. They're the radical left. So you see, you can't win, Gary. You're a loser. And no one is going to cover your story. The Los Angeles Times certainly won't. They're us. We own them. They'll cover a story only if it doesn't challenge the orthodoxy or challenge the stabilization. But when was the last time did they originate a story that exposed their own paradigm outside of editorial comment, outside of op-ed page, when they went after it and stuck with it, just like the New York Times? Only after its history do they repeat on it, like anthropologists digging through the bones of a culture and trying to figure out what the culture was like. It doesn't work. Just ask the Indians. Why weren't they at the head of the investigation instead of the back end jumping in when they had to cover the story? So you see, Gary, we got the orthodox routine down pat. We know how to make people put in a position that they've got to be covering the issues from our perspective. Orthodoxy wins, you lose. You stay on the outside. Publish your stupid little articles in newspapers where there'll be no legislative action. And oh, by the way, Gary, you want a hearing on Waco? We'll give you one. And you know who's going to head it? A one-day hearing? You bet, Buster. Arlen Specter, the magic silver bullet, the invisible bullet that got through Connally and had as much metal on it afterwards, even though there was more metal in Connally's arm and in Kennedy's body than could possibly have been on the bullet. He's heading up the Waco investigation. The man who did the big cover-up on the Warren Commission, he's going to head the Waco investigation. He's the head of it. So send your papers in. Of course, we'll look at them objectively, and the press will be there, but so won't the so-called authorities. And, Gary, who do you think they're going to believe? When Senator Claude Pepper did the objective review of quackery in America, for 2 weeks the networks covered it. Who do you think was setting it aside? Quackbusters. Who do quackbusters honor? The orthodoxy. And what was considered quackery? Organic produce, vitamins and minerals, and herbs. And we made anyone who used a vitamin and mineral look like a subversive. We made you think that if you were getting well, it was in your head. That if you had overcome your cancer or heart disease, it was all in your mind, that you were delusional. And we had to protect you from this $30 billion a year health scam. Now, you know, Gary, when you came along and said, well, okay, let's just check your facts. What are you calling quackery? And they said everything in the health field. So I added up all the organic produce, all the vitamins and all the minerals, all the herbs, all the nurse midwifery. In 1 year, everything in the health field, and it only came to $4 billion, the entire health field, Everything every health food store in America sold. Well, how did you go from 4 billion to 30 billion? That's bad economics. If I got to question your economics being off by almost 600%, and then how accurate are you? Assuming that you're even accurate that there's quackery. Well, brown rice isn't quackery. White rice is. Having adequate B complex isn't quackery when every study shows the average American is deficient in every major nutrient. And then every doctor in their family that we checked was deficient in vitamin C, and this is based upon unscientific, arbitrary, politically contrived, economically gainful recommended daily allowance, the amount of a nutrient enough to keep a cockroach alive. But when we give people 150,000 milligrams of vitamin C 3 days a week intravenous, they're cured of their hepatitis B and C within about 3 to 5 weeks, and ozone does the same thing. Well, yeah, Gary, who's going to publish that? You think you're going to get that in a peer-reviewed journal? First, you're not going to get any money to research it. Secondly, no university is going to allow you to use their facilities to verify that, because they would rather get $200,000 to study whether horses masturbate. Yeah, Gary, you heard me right. $200,000. Isn't that something? But you won't get a nickel to study vitamin C in cancer. And when they do a study on vitamin C in cancer, it will be a fraud perpetrated by the Mayo Clinic's Dr. Mortel, who used chemotherapy patients instead of ones that Linus Pauling said don't use chemotherapy, because my study at the Vale 11 Hospital, where I gave cancer patients vitamin C 10,000 milligrams a day every day of their life, they did not have chemotherapy prior to that, which knocks out the liver. Well, Mortel gave only a limited amount of vitamin C for a limited number of days and to people with chemotherapy, and didn't give Linus Pauling nor the New England Journal of Medicine an opportunity to challenge the protocol. Therefore, it was a fraudulent study. But, Gary, we gave you AZT, a terribly fraudulent study. It has never been shown in any study that was not supported by Bro's Welcome to work in prolonging the lives of persons with AIDS. So do you think that you're going to get a vitamin C study done? No way. It's not going to happen. You're not going to get funding. We control it. It's our peer review system. Yeah, Gary, we have bad science and repetitive science, and 95% of the things you see published each month are things that never should have been done to begin with because they don't prove anything. We keep doing the same work forever, but no one looks in on us. And no one will look in on us. We'll do in mental health, we'll do the most asinine studies and pay more money for them than you could ever imagine. We will study whether or not when we give alcohol to a group of mice, whether they become cannibalistic, and that will cost over $500,000 to one university. No one will challenge it. And if you should remotely get some of these loose cannon and yet to be properly indoctrinated legislators who think they can go in and idealistically change Congress, we'll show them. We'll show them that their legislation doesn't get passed. We'll put some word to them, hey, we know the skeleton's in your closet, and see how quickly they fall into line. And if they should produce a hearing, we'll make sure that nothing comes from that hearing. Gary, when was the last time any of these hearings on drug abuse, on child abuse, on abuses in the workplace, when did any of these things cause something to change? After all, you can create all the laws in the world, but you don't change human nature, and we've got our pulse on human nature. You want to be different? Well, go up and live in the northern part of California in the redwood forest. But, Gary, our audience is your mother and father. You never saw them take a stand against anything that they weren't told to take a stand against. We know the game and you don't. You're a little too naive and you're a little too vulnerable. Now, just remember, you can do whatever you want in the alternative field because no one cares. It's considered alternative. The very terminology itself excludes it from responsible and respectable dialogue. Where did you get with the environment, Gary? We got the guys in your movement playing football and having lunch on Fridays with the vice president. Who won, Gary? You don't have an environment movement today, do you? Because you got too many photo obsessions with environmental leaders and their family. You see, it's very tempting to lose your principles when you get close to such positions of power. And by the way, Gary, just for your edification, you're wrong. You're terribly wrong on one of your statistics. You said that in the entire state of Arkansas there were only 3 women that Clinton hadn't had sex with. We counted 5. But that doesn't matter. We elect people of integrity. We didn't elect Jerry Brown. You wanted to, but you're kind of old-fashioned, aren't you, Gary? We got our man in position. He had been on the Trilateral Commission. You should have paid attention. He was on the Council on Foreign Relations. You really should have paid attention. Those are our think tanks. Those are the ones that we bring in a man named Soros who made over $5 billion as an arbitrager. And we didn't ask who he affected and how much debt he created for other people and how his work affected other people's lives. Now he's one of us. You see, we always get the people becoming one of us. They can't help but say yes. Power is so wonderful. It's the ultimate aphrodisiac. It's titillating, it's tempting, because your self-esteem is enhanced. And as long as your character is enhanced, your self-esteem is enhanced, your ego is stroked. Look out here, Gary. Look at the lawyers. We've got lawyers that fail most of their cases, but as long as the media calls them a dream team, they win. They go into a restaurant and people say, oh, go ahead of me. You're more important. Gee, Gary, you wouldn't let someone go ahead of you because you think everyone has a right to be equal. We're in la-la land. Let me tell you something. You think this trial of O.J. Simpson is a freak show? You're going to write an editorial, Gary, I know you are, about how this shows the debasement of our values. The media loves a crisis. It exploits it. It loves to show body parts. It loves to show everything that can get it a rating. It is a part of the problem. It is a mirror of the tragedy of our times. You'll say, but no one will pay attention to you, that it proves and disproves both points. If O.J. Simpson is innocent, it is a travesty that he would have to spend $14 million to prove his innocence. What does it mean about those of us who would also be innocent but wouldn't have $1,400? It means that every middle class and poor person in America would then be dealt with capriciously and arbitrarily. If he's guilty, it's the same tragedy, because it shows that if you're rich enough and powerful enough that you can buy yourself freedom even when you're guilty. Who wins in this, Gary? The media, idiot. The media. And that's who all was supposed to win. No one else. Do you think this is a matter about law? It has nothing to do with law. There's no law going to be made here. This is a freak show, and everyone participating in it is a freak. And the media are the ultimate freak masters. But remember, Gary, the very same people you're asking to think are going to sit today and watch Oprah, that high priest of trash, as she parades her dysfunctional people forward, and America has taken that as its venue for self-enlightenment. Who do you think is going to challenge this? No one. The media's not going to challenge itself. It'll sometimes do a critique in about a minute and a half, a little news bit story. It'll have on one of these acronyms from the past. Maybe it'll draw out of the closet one of the people, one of the kind of Sander Van Oker types, and he'll say something, mumble it around. They'll say, thank you for having been on, and go right on. But any media that has yet to thoroughly challenge the Kennedy assassination, any media that still promotes the use of pesticides, the Basic 4 Food Group, any media that cannot see that most of medicine, with the exception of emergency medicine, which is good, most does not work, any media that cannot understand that most of the people in our society who have gotten rich and powerful have done so at the cost of other people, the quality of their lives, including false values of creating false debt, real debt, but from a false premise in people. The very people who would not challenge the World Bank, the very people like Hillary Clinton who say that they're for children. I'm for children. I'm for children. Well, Hillary, why aren't you for the 200 million children being used in slave labor to make products that GATT, your New World Order, promoted? let me be a little prophetic. Anyone who supports GATT better take a step back and ask, what did you really support? Can you imagine that if you walked up on television and say, hey there, we're going to be bidding on something now, and it's going to be a fun bid. Instead of you bidding for me and this object behind this curtain, I'm going to give you money, and you're going to give me your bid. I'm going to give you, Texas, a legislator, $12 million to build an extension onto a university in your name. I want your vote on NAFTA. I'm going to give you for $14 million for a pork barrel project on a state roads project that's redundant in your state. I want your vote on NAFTA. I need 21 votes to make NAFTA happen. But after all, we've got to take this great democracy south of the border, where we're going to have all these hundreds of thousands of American jobs made and great market for our products. We've got to get the vote. Well, they bought the vote, a shameless exploitation of the political process. And Gary, you didn't hear a whimper out of anyone except those in the alternative movement. Now we took GATT, and GATT's got a one-world mentality. Its whole premise is that. And guess who we promoted and Clinton promoted to be president of GATT? No, couldn't be. Not one of the most corrupt regimes in history. Not a family that is tyrannical. The Salinas family, the very same one. You're kidding. That has now been chosen by the Dow Jones Company to be on the board? Whoa, and they own the Wall Street Journal? Never saw a drug that they didn't like? And he was suggested to be president of the World Trade Organization, known as GATT, head of the World Trade Organization that oversee GATT. And you mean, let me see if this works right. You mean we can take this organization and we can get rid of all tariffs and trade barriers by making an international? Well, that's good, isn't it? I mean, isn't that great? I see. No one told me that. I mean, if you put it in that, you mean that the average American who's worked over 65 years to gain some semblance of a survival income through minimum wages and to earn some seniority and to have some stability, now where they've got workman's compensation and they've got their Social Security and they've got some things, now they can take their factory or their computer service or their fulfillment, and they can move it to Sri Lanka, and they can build free with no charge on any land they want, any factory of any size, with no environmental standards. They can hire labor at 10 cents an hour with no workman's compensation, no safety requirements. They can produce a product that can be toxic, that would previously have not been allowed in the United States and now cannot not be allowed in the United States. Well, hold on a second then. What's going to happen to the 6 to 7 million union workers and small business people and the other 20 million small business people who own small firms of 10 or less employees? How are they going to be able to compete if so much of their cost of producing their product or service goes into taxes and wages and all these other entitlements? How can then they bring the same product out and compete in the marketplace? You're saying they can't. In other words, I see. Well, that's clever. In other words, you can take an insurance actuary that's now in Hartford, Connecticut, where they're spending $112 a square foot for office space, $41 an hour, including all their different benefits and compensations and salary per employee. And you can make that same thing happen in India for $1 an hour with no compensation beyond that. And because of the satellite hookup system now and the information highway, you can move all your actuaries overseas. You don't need them here, and that would save over 55% of the cost of doing business. My God, most companies work under less than an 8% profit, and you're giving them an advantage of an additional 55%. Well, wouldn't that benefit the consumer by lowering the cost of goods? So I see. So that would keep consumers from complaining because now they would have some cheaper items. That's real good. So give the average person some inexpensive items, but don't ask them what it really costs. What's the real unqualified cost within that? And that would include the loss of maybe 7 million American jobs. And that's over the next 5 years. By the way, is it true that we've actually lost, we are a net 40,000 jobs with NAFTA, and that this $47 billion bailout of Mexico was to stabilize the funds that were put in from the largest firm that was the former home and CEO covetship of the Rubin, the Secretary of the Treasury, that Solomon Brothers, where he was the head, he's now making sure that his firm and other Wall Street firms' investments in speculation in the peso is protected. But will any of this money actually help the Mexican public? It won't. I see. I didn't know. What am I? I believe everything I read in the paper. Hey, I'm one of those guys. So no one's going to probe that deep. No, you're giving me a guarantee on that. I have your assurance that no journalist is going to really go down to Mexico, see the corruption, see who owns the country, see how virtually every person in government down there of any authority even actually pays. Is it really true that of the 67 what we might consider U.S. attorneys here, but down there they run the judicial system, that they actually, some of them pay as much as $1 million to get their job because they make so much more back in corruption from drug trade? Well, why would we want to give, I see, we wouldn't want to give money to a company that was so utterly corrupted, with such a, it's an oligarchy, right? Well, that wouldn't look good, would it? If Bill Clinton says we want to bail out our friends on Wall Street, because after all, the people on Wall Street helped elect me to office, and I can't forget where they came in. That's kind of interesting. Well, let's mark off looking into Mexico with any real criticism. I mean, we'll keep to the public line. And how about our basic four food group? Can we do anything at all about that? I mean, can we change it at all? After all, Gary, we're spending $1.2 trillion on medicine this year in sickness. We're spending less than $5 billion, $5 billion out of $1.2 trillion on prevention. But can't we promote our breast prevention? I mean, that's something we're doing. We're giving women tamoxifen. That's good, right? Now, come on. Don't be a sourpuss. Come on. You're telling me tamoxifen is not a good prevention program. You're telling me why? What's wrong with it? Well, let's look at it. You take a woman who does not have cancer. You give her a substance that's very toxic that produces liver cancer and uterine cancer and causes blood toxicity in order to prevent breast cancer. And then you sell that to 8,000 women, and you have more women wanting to get in the program that can fit. You give 10% of the women who do not have cancer of the breast preventative mastectomies at Sloan Kettering in New York. You take off healthy breasts, but you prevent future breast cancer. Don't you see the logic, Gary? You're not in rhythm with us. You're not in sync. Remember, we're in Hollywood now, and everything's got to be in the la-la sync. We all live in deception here, right? We make something true that's false, and then we sell everyone on the trueness of its falseness. Didn't you figure that out? Gary, we can make the average people think they need to have their breasts removed, and they do it. They even get their little girls, because we scare them to death. You see, we use scare, not enlightenment. And we use our paradigm because the paradigm is limited. We say it's genetic, so if you've had breast cancer in your family, have your breast taken off early. You know, that doesn't make sense to me. I want to tell them that it's not genetic. It's not. It absolutely isn't. You can find a gene for everything, but it doesn't mean the gene is causative. It doesn't mean that. You've never been able to show that. But I can show you that there are women as a whole culture who don't develop the breast cancer we do in any statistical amount. Take the Japanese, because they don't have the meat, they don't have the animal fat, and they have the soy protein. And they have 300% less breast cancer. So Are you telling me that we are so stupid that we would volunteer? Well, Gary, the very same people who are going to eat themselves into oblivion, who have no constructive way to get out of the pain and anger of their life, these are the people that will eat whatever we tell them. They'll drink. Look, Gary, we just gave them a commercial that shows a mother creating a cup of coffee for her teenage son. We've now institutionalized and had accepted the caffeineism of America. Now, wasn't your doctoral dissertation on caffeine? Didn't you do 5 years of clinical studies on caffeine and show that there are over 115 different conditions that can be produced by caffeineism as little as 1 cup a day, and that if it were created today, it would be so toxic it would be considered a dangerous drug? Yeah, I did. Well, guess who wins? Well, the fact that you win doesn't mean you're right. I'd hate to think that might makes right is a concept at which we should all live. You've had the form. You've told me everything that is bad is good because it benefits those in power. You've told me that your media will promote someone like Donald Trump without looking at the consequences to other people of what he creates and others create. You've told me about Michael Milken being Man of the Year so many times, but no one looking at who was lost their livelihoods. You've told me about drugs that are chemical lobotomies that people can't get enough of, like Prozac. You've told me about all the women who have been disempowered to feel that they're a living disease to which the doctor is the cure. You've told me about how you've been able to create laws that protect you and your groups and your monopolies, so there is a restraint of trade and a violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act and a violation of basic democratic principles. You've told me about politicians being such whores that the PACs get their attention and their loyalty and not the rest. You've told me that the American public will not think about who's going to give $114 million to a presidential campaign. What do they want in return, since there's no unconditional giving by these people, and we don't ask those questions. You told me about the tyranny of a Clinton health care plan that, had it been implemented, it would have taken anyone choosing to find an alternative therapy. It would have had the right, with 113 different references in their report that the media never focused on, that it would take away all your worldly possessions. It could confiscate your land, your home, your bank account, and put you in jail. It would do the same to the physician or healthcare provider, the herbalist, the homeopath, the naturopath, the chiropractor, the holistic orthomolecular physician. It would do the same to them. It was punitive in the extreme. You told me all these things, and you told me that it was made up by a group of 421 special corporate insiders representing the pharmaceutical industry, where we would have unlimited medication of America, and it would have been accepted. You told me that people don't think any longer, they merely respond. You told me that we have no healthy way of dealing with the issues in our life, that we have created unhealthy sublimations through drugs, gambling, and alcohol, and violence. You told me that we don't think about the actions of our politicians, and as long as the politician gives us assurance of strength and their confidence of their strength, that we will follow them. So in order to get elected, they'll go create a nice little war, and we won't look at the consequences of the war, its people, or anything else. We don't look beyond the headline. We are a headline nation. We've lost our sense of literacy. You told me that we create right and left think tanks, that all they do becomes self-serving to their own political ideologies and agendas, and therefore are no better than any other ism of orthodoxy. You told me that every institution has been corrupted by its very need to maintain its and perpetuate its own existence. Well, Gary, you can tell me this all day long, a media that is culpable and acts as the lapdog of this, but no one will think that they're a part of the problem, Gary. That's the beauty of a belief system. It indoctrinates you so perfectly, so completely, that the moment any word, any gesture, any symbol challenges it, we have planted 1 million minefields in the emotional quagmire. Step in that quagmire, and the emotional minefield explodes. The defense mechanism is perfect. It is so perfect that no matter what crimes we create, the populace will accept, as long as a person smiles and waves. Who wins, Gary? We do. You lose. The outside becomes smaller, and we can demonize you. We can take some harebrained, fringe extreme example, and we can suddenly make it look as if everyone believing in anything that challenges the orthodoxy is equally as extreme. We will not listen to those who are compassionate and thoughtful, who are scholarly, and who are balanced in their perspectives, challenge any of the institutions, and give positive options for them. Instead, we will look at the exhibitionist, the extremist, those who are so insecure that they will need to have something that is so radical that not anyone will benefit from it in most cases, and we will make that seem as if that is the person representing your position. So we will take unqualified people who are hurting people, and by offering them treatments that don't work, and we'll say, this is alternative treatment, when it is not. We will be able to defend the basic 4 food group, and the meat consumption will increase. Gary, last year we sold more meat, $7 billion in fast food restaurants, than everything together sold in the whole holistic field. All of your health food stores and brown rice and herbs, all that together, which we know helps, but we can't admit. We did more in hamburgers last year, Gary. So where do you think the values are? Gary, you can write 10 million books. How many books on peace and love are there? How many books on prudent living are there? How many books on transformation of life and health are there? Do you see anybody actualizing them? Only 4% of the American population have ever actualized anything. Now, you're going to tell me that you can still make a change. Well, I'm going to give you the form for a few minutes here and try to prove to me that you can do something that will make a difference. Fair enough. Thank you. You're correct. Everything is dysfunctional. Everything is a lie. Everything is its opposite. Nothing is real. A basketball player who's a megalomaniac will make $4 million a year, $3 million he sniffs up his nose, hates the fans, and that's not like Bob Cousy or Jerry West, who are real athletes, who would have paid you or worked as a used car salesman if they need to, because they honored the sport. Now we don't look at anyone who honors the sport. We look at the false values of how much money they make, because it's become a business. You've tried to make everything seem as if, as long as it's a business, it can be integrated in and become a part of our heartstream. Well, I want to tell you that there are those people out there who are looking for different goals to value. If we can just get them to set aside quality time and stop the waste of their time on meaningless and negative pursuits, stop the negativity that permeates every part of our society, be honest about what works and doesn't work, be honest about who they are and who they're not, then I believe that we can have a person stop being dictated to by the falseness in our society. How can you do that? Well, you can stop spending time on trying to fulfill other people's expectations of who you should be when you grow up. Everybody at every point in life can change. Stop looking for fulfillment in your relationships. The need to have fulfillment in a relationship means that you have a relationship for the wrong reason. Therefore, it's highly conditional. You're going to be placing pressures upon a person that person cannot possibly meet. And when they don't meet it, then you're going to blame the relationship and them. The only friend worth having and the only relationship you should have is one that you do not need. Because when you don't need it, then you can enjoy it as it is instead of trying this constant psychic makeover. Look at the codependency that is inbred in almost all of our relationships, including those at work. Is the energy of the person right for you? It doesn't matter anything else. If the energy is right, then you have a common thread that you can share. When can you stop being a caretaker for all the projects that you thought would make you more socially responsible and start looking after what's essential? A value that you create that can challenge the value that you've held and break societal values. Can you stop yourself from being manipulated, your feelings from being manipulated, your opinions from being manipulated? Can you begin to get a grasp on what it is to have an original thought and follow it through with the confidence it's okay to make mistakes? Can you overcome the fear and anxiety and depression and guilt that motivates most of your behavior, that keeps you in line, that keeps you gridlocked? It's very easy to think of something that is more idealistic, that is more pure, that is more wholesome. It is a completely different energy that allows you to actualize it. And remember, it's not what you think that counts. It's what you do that matters. Stop denying your old needs that you never met. Get real with real needs. Take risks. Nothing is going to be gained unless you take a risk. But take appropriate risks. Do not play it safe. Get out of control. We are a society that has used the idea of staying in control as a metaphor for keeping obedient. Obedience training is for dogs not urinating in the carpet. It shouldn't be a standard of human behavior to keep them into a collective mind consciousness. It's good to lose control, not violently, but consciously, where you don't know the outcome of something. You do not have control of the outcome, and that means there's an adventure and excitement in life. That's why we go down a roller coaster. We're not in control of anything for that long plunge down, and we yell and we scream, and it's exciting and exhilarating and terrifying, and then we want to do it again. Challenge your fears. Most of them are societally implanted. They're protections to keep you from growing. If you've been taught that every question you have can be answered within the existing paradigm, then the paradigm itself becomes your belief system. You're merely an extension of it. And though in your heart, your conscience will tell you it is wrong, you will have to go by the consensus. 10 opinions are still one when they come from the same paradigm. Having a difference of opinion only is valid when you have a difference of belief. The whole idea of being able to understand alternative belief systems is to show where they have something in common and nurture it. So we're not afraid of Catholicism, Judaism, Islam. We're not afraid of it if we don't have to protect ourselves. The sanctuary that keeps us in and hidden keeps all other things out. Well, how in the world are we going to be not manipulated, not prejudiced, not racist, not biased, if all we can believe in is our own orthodoxy? Remember, tolerance is not the same as acceptance. Can we stop feeling like victims and stop blaming? We have had too much self-doubt that interferes in the quality of our life. Why not simply believe in nothing for a day and replace the nothing with things that you want to believe in that are wholesome, that are loving, that are filled with grace and compassion? So even when you walk alone and no one else around you believes in what you believe, you're not alone. Everyone in this world has a silent witness. All of our thoughts, all of our actions are known. A thought is energy. Energy is consciousness. What we think, we can project. A negative thought is a negative projection. We are surrounded by petty jealousies and envies of life's unfulfilled. It is a contradiction to be both spiritual and envious, spiritual and jealous. With no two energies being able to share the same space with equal intensity at the same time, to the degree that you're positive, you will not be negative. To the degree you're negative, you cannot be positive. To the degree you're processing wellness by eating what honors the body and honoring health, you cannot be eating something that's sick, that dishonors it and produces disease. Disease is a process. It's not a noun, it's a verb. So as long as you know that you're happy with who you are and that you're not afraid of challenges and you're not doing something to gain just a false sense of security, you're not doing something to stroke your ego, you're not doing something to build up your self-esteem in a false way. You don't need your self-esteem built up. It's a natural given right. You simply don't have to accept anyone else's negative input. By reaffirming each day what's positive, you can begin to look beyond your ism. You can begin to look at multiple realities, multiple truths, and see what you can learn from them. And suddenly your old value system begins just to peel away because you have something far richer, deeper, and more meaningful. You don't want your life to mimic the larger paradigm. You want it to be autonomous and unique. You can still share to a collective consciousness, but you are not going to be victimized by it. When you take a look at how much you can do by freeing yourself, then you're not in any one ism. Traditionally, non-commercial radio has had a poverty-ism. It prays for poverty, though it hates the consequences of it, but it gives it identification. It gives it a meaning that is antithetical to the richness. It gives it a challenge. The rich are in contempt of poverty because it shows them what they don't want to be and a fear that they could be if they did not continue making more. Both are imbalanced. My own audience in WBAI in New York hates, not my audience, the general membership of the station hates my audience because my audience are engaged in constructive, positive work. So they're considered bourgeois. The people who would consider them bourgeois tend to be negative, self-hating, hating others, highly prejudicial, and wrap themselves in their own self-righteousness. I see it everywhere. At some point, you got to step back and say, can I get through a day without feeling bad about myself or others? Can I get through a day without bad-mouthing? Can I get through a day by looking at what I can do to honor the fact that I'm a live human being and I can do something constructive for other people to serve in a positive way without needing something in return, without a hidden agenda? Can I develop Gandhi's concept of the austere spirit? Can I create a more minimalistic impression of my life so I'm not living just to support my debt? The answer is yes. People do it. About 5% of the American population do it. Now you can say, well, that's only 5%. Well, only 5% is 15 million people. Less than 1% of the American population can motivate change. And you can say, how's that possible? Well, because deep within the consciousness of the 95% who have not yet come to grips with their own identity and their own issues, there is still a truth. It's in every person. And it will hear, even through all the layers of defense and anger, it will hear what you say. And for a period of time, it will stand quiet while change occurs. So when people become vegetarians and they start their juicing and they start buying organic produce and they start doing yoga and they start going to nursing midwifery classes and they start trying acupuncture and they start going to chiropractors and they start taking their B-complex and they start using the naturopathic and homeopathic formulas and they start using meditation and they start minimalizing the excesses in their life and they start being honest about who they are and they reaffirm it every day and they start letting go of negative people in their life and negative things in their life, the majority stands by for a period of time quietly watching this. It's a phenomena. It's like a snake shedding its skin. You can't help but be transfixed on this process. Now, when someone does change, their whole life lights up. To a person that's never had a life that is consistently positive, that is immersed in their pain, not realizing so much of the pain comes from their emotions, which come from their thoughts. The very thought that you think will create the emotion that you feel, which then perpetuates a physiological reaction. These people can't see beyond their pain to see any other reality. They, oh, doctor, I'm in pain. I'm so sick. Help me. But your arthritis is due to more than a localized inflammation in the synovial fluid. It's take a look at the lack of bonding and love in your life. Take a look at the principles by which you live. How much time do you waste on the telephone in meaningless, repetitive conversation? How much time do you waste in front of a television? Do you listen to hate radio? Do you listen to the Bob Grants of the world who spew forth anger and negativity and highly reactionary attitudes? There is one principle that can work, and that is challenge constructively in your own mind what you're not happy with and what doesn't feel good and what doesn't work, and then ask yourself, what is the process that I can do to stop the patterns that I continue to recycle that create how I feel? And then one day, you wake up and you see you're a different human being. You don't have the arthritis, you don't have the high blood pressure, you don't have the depression, you don't have the medicines. You don't have the need to confirm with your doctor what you're doing. You've taken back the power and control of your own life. You don't need to vote for someone because you're Democrat or Republican. You don't need to live in a place because, well, that's where I'm supposed to live if I'm poor, if I'm middle class, or I'm rich. You don't hang out with people and tolerate people just because, well, they've always been there. You begin to appreciate how wonderful this country is, how beautiful life is, and that through all the negativity and all that doesn't work, change starts by being honest about it.
This is KPFK Los Angeles, 90.7 FM, non-commercial, listener-sponsored Pacifica Radio for all of Southern and parts of Central California. We are on the telephone live as of May 10th, 1995, with Gary Null in New York. Can you continue?
Sitting here just talking to myself. These are the kind of off-the-top-of-my-head conversations I have with myself sometimes. And I'm sorry that I had left you out of this conversation, so let me throw this back to you so we can talk together.
Well, I'm pretty overwhelmed. I think it's been fantastic and fabulous, but we've painted a picture in which we are hopeless and helpless, surrounded by gigantic, powerful, fantastically wealthy enemies, and not understanding, along with you, what is going on. How do you break through, if it's necessary to break through, the hypnotic opaqueness?
The whole idea is this. Here's the simplicity of the answer, and it does not in any way negate the complexity of the problem. You see, I spent almost my entire career trying to figure out and working so hard as an environmentalist, conservationist, nutritionist, preventive medicine researcher, all the things I've done, investigative reporter, all the things I've done, I kept thinking, as long as I keep showing these people what's wrong and doesn't work, someone will pay attention. Well, what I didn't understand was that is the wrong approach. You cannot change a paradigm. Contrary to Marilyn Ferguson, their Aquarian Conspiracy, and Fritjof Capra, and the Turning Point, paradigms do not change. They absolutely do not. What does change is individuals who step out of the paradigms. So create your own paradigm. Don't try to change the existing one. Banking system hasn't changed. Political system hasn't changed. Religious institutions haven't changed. That doesn't change. Time immemorial show that these don't change. But what will change is you and me. I no longer have to believe in them. I no longer have to accept them as they would have me accept them. I can selectively accept them. I can accept that which I feel is reasonable. Now, paradigms are not all intrinsically good or all intrinsically bad. Not every person that's gotten rich has done so unethically or illegally. So the person who can look at what is acceptable can then accept that. And what is not, at least they will have the honesty and will not self-edit will not selectively censor themselves. They can be honest about things. So to the degree that something within a system does work, you can accept that within a system. And if not, accept another system. So what you get away from this monistic way of thinking, a single reality, a single cause for a single disease, a single cure for a single disease, both medically and environmentally and societally. You start looking at everything as being multifactorial, multiple realities, multiple cause, multiple effect. And when you do that, then you say, well, gee whiz, you mean I can select from anything I want? Sure you can. And I don't have to subscribe to all of it? No. No, if you just, do you want to learn Sufism? And do you want to incorporate that with Taoism? And do you want to incorporate that with Buddhism? That's okay, you can do that. You have the right to do that. You don't have to you don't have to shave your head and take a vow of celibacy and go live in Sri Lanka. You can be a Taoist right here if you want. And you can interpret it in your way. You have the right to interpret anything that you want in your reality. And that's important. There is no reality. There is no truth. There are millions of reality and millions of truths. Therefore, you're no longer going to be manipulated. And so, I'm not a vegetarian. I don't eat anything with a face or a heartbeat, but I eat some things raw, and I eat some things cooked, and I juice some things because I took from the school of natural hygiene, and I took from the school of veganism, and I took from the school of macrobiotics, but I'm not a macrobiotic, and I'm not a vegan. I don't want to become an ism, because that in itself is an orthodoxy. That in itself is a paradigm. So when you realize that you can make constructive, conscious selections from whatever works, then it benefits you. I can't be against the police. I can be against corrupt police because there are honest police. But before we were, well, they're this, and therefore you were philosophically against them. Well, that's wrong. You can't suddenly say that within any system you can't find, like I found 1,000 doctors within the orthodoxy who had come forward and proclaimed their willingness to go beyond the limitations. A simple reasoning. If you're board certified in cardiology, as Dr. Kastorf is, and you find that you're only able to help a very small percentage of your patients using all that you had learned, all of your tools, and then someone from another belief system says, but did you realize that there's other ways you could help the heart? You could use magnesium and calcium and bromelain. You could use the orotates and the aspartates. You could use chelation. And you could use magnetic balancing. And suddenly you say, well, I never heard about any of this. I didn't read about it. It couldn't be true. Yes, it is. Suspend your reality for a moment and look at another reality. So you'll do. And now you see that, gee whiz, this guy over there, you actually look at the medical records, you look at the patients, they've actually benefited. It's not just placebo. Now you start to incorporate into your practice, and you see that, gee whiz, it does work. You are getting results. Now you got one or two choices. You either do it quietly, where none of your colleagues feel threatened, or you do it publicly, where you proclaim yourself, you come out of the closet. Well, what happens is simple. If you come out of the closet, you must change a lot more things in your life, or you will feel bad, because you have been isolated and you will be attacked. Everything that you had valued will no longer be there for you if it's from the orthodoxy. You'll be in the neighborhood, but you will be the neighbor that they talk about now instead of the neighbor that they brag about. You'll be the one they gossip about. You still may work in a hospital, but none of your colleagues will feel comfortable being around you. You threaten them. You have a knowledge they do not. You've been willing to actualize a reality they have not. What's that make you? No one's going to allow that. It's not the way paradigms work. Belief systems don't function on this level of you have a reality, but we don't. Or you continue to be in the neighborhood, in your office, but you don't let anyone know except your patients that you're smuggling in surreptitiously on the sly. You're using some nutrients like carnitine for their heart, coenzyme Q10 for their heart and immune system. And you see the progress the patient's making. But then you got a problem. The patient is not a holistic patient. The patient's a part of the problem, too. The patient's not going to take on the diet that you tell them. It's too radical. They'll give you 10,000 excuses. So you try to do bits and pieces of good. But there's not the collective whole. You don't get the holistic patient willing to look and examine all parts of their life to see how everything is put together. They're not willing to connect all the dots. So you get a little frustrated. You think, well, here I became a more holistic doctor, but I don't have holistic patients, and I don't have a holistic community that's willing to look and review objectively what I'm doing. So we do have doctors who are supportive, theoretically, intellectually, and practically measures of holistic health, but they're doing so in the closet. And you might have as many as 1%. That brings you up to around 6,000. Now, again, you can say, well, what good is 6,000 out of 600,000? Well, the 6,000 in time might be able to influence 1 each, 2 each within a year or two. Then you got 18,000. It doesn't change the paradigm, but at a certain point, the leaders of the paradigm may start to justify the use of vitamin E. Now you don't have to be in the closet to use vitamin E. You don't have to say, take this vitamin E. You can say, take this vitamin E. And not 50 units, you can say, take 800 units for intermittent claudication. The paradigm will now own vitamin E. No one will ever remember Wilfred Shute, who for 33 years with his brother gave over 30,000 patients vitamin E and helped protect them from gangrene and other things. Everyone else before them will not be remembered. It'll only be that suddenly orthodoxy discovers vitamin E, and it exists from this day forward. You have the automatic mind wipe. Everything before this date is prehistoric history. Neolithic symbols of the past don't count. And that's how it works. Now, they'll still be using a lot of other stuff they shouldn't, but at least there's one thing in there, especially if the doctor benefits from it and their patients and begin to use it. So it's a slow process. It still must maintain control, but it will allow small things in. But only if you look for multiple realities. You've got to go out of your way to look for other realities. That means you have to create some discomfort. That means you have to break comfort addiction. If you're not willing to break your addiction to comfort, then you're not going to have a multiple reality. And the more realities you're willing to find, the broader your life becomes, the more vision you have. It's like standing on a mountaintop with a blindfold on and then making a tiny, tiny little pin-sized hole in the right eye blindfold. So you can see out, you can see a little light, you can see something in the distance. And every time you open yourself up to a new reality, you expand the hole. And in time, suddenly, through a lifetime, you're seeing a lot clearer and a lot more. Now, how do you explain to someone who's never seen anything what you've seen? That their reality of blindness is one that they don't have to accept. A lot of it's self-imposed. A lot of it's dictated originally from parents and other beliefs. So even when people feel comfort in their addictive state, they are still capable of going through the discomfort of seeing a larger reality. The trouble is we've made comfort a high standard of acceptance, and addictions always create comfort. Cocaine creates comfort. Gambling creates comfort. Buying a lottery creates comfort. The idea that somehow the short road, is going to get us to the destination quicker. That if only we had money, if we only had these things, that's the answer to our problems. That has very little to do with the actual problem. It's far deeper. It's on a belief system level. So that's what I try to show people. So don't try to change the paradigm. Don't try to convince people that you're right. Don't try to prove to people that your idea of how you eat and live is the better way. Just go quietly about doing it. And in time, you will connect with other people of a like mind. You will create a synergy, a comfort in knowing that there are people who also are seeing the colors you are. It's like going into a garden of flowers, and you are the ones that are not colorblind. You see the colors. There's a joy in knowing. There's an exhilaration that comes from this transformation. We should not be reforming anything in our society. Reformation accepts that the orthodoxy is right. We merely need to change it in some small way. I'm suggesting transformation. Transformation is a quantum leap ahead of reformation. And every human being is capable of doing that. I see it all the time.
But you're not seeing it in the society as a whole.
It can't exist as a whole. It can't. You see, it's contradictory. If, for instance, you have created research, and the research shows that a virus is supposed to cause a disease, and all your livelihood and all your employees' livelihood and your future is based upon trying to prove that, and the orthodoxy has said that you are correct in your pursuit, then if you were to suddenly one day say, hold on a second, it's not the virus that counts, it's the lifestyle, and you know that there's not going to be any financial support for you, then orthodoxy will maintain its grip and control because it controls the way people live. It's their support system. We've become a society that is, forget regular welfare, everyone in our society is on a form of welfare because it's a form of artificial support. Your belief system then is connected to the very thing you're getting support from. For example, when I interviewed people who worked in a arms manufacturing plant during the Vietnam War, and I said, I want to give you a hypothetical situation. If we could end the war and all the suffering and killing tomorrow, but you would lose your job because you wouldn't need this factory anymore, or we could keep the war going and you would keep your job, which would you prefer? 97% of the people I surveyed said, keep it going, I need my job. You begin to appreciate then the reality, not the platitudes, not the mock sense of concern, but the reality of what dictates most people's existence, their fear of insecurity. So therefore, when you make decisions from insecurity, society wins, because society is there to give you assurances, and society is there to give you guarantees. Only by freeing yourself and becoming autonomous do you see the reality of what exists. But that takes a lot of courage, and there are people who've broken through, and they're very courageous people.
What is your formula for courage? I don't remember reading one in Nutrition in the Mind, but you probably have a supplement which might help balance in that direction.
Well, the most important book I've ever written is about courage and change. It's called Change Your Life Now. And it deals specifically, of the 50 books I've written, Change Your Life Now was my first on the philosophy of life, and I just wrote it last year. And I couldn't figure out why my other books, people really weren't following them. They'd read them, but they didn't follow them. Like 95% of the people listen to my radio program every day don't follow the Change Your Life Now. It has to do with realizing that every single human being is a hero if they choose to challenge tyranny. Well, the tyranny can be a tyranny of fear. Fear can be artificial. You fear someone who's black. Why? Because they're black? Well, your belief system tells you to fear them. They're different. So overcoming prejudice begins to nurture the child within them. The child is the ultimate hero. The child, put a group of children in a room at the age of 2, and they don't care if you're black or white or pretty or ugly. They don't care about anything except existing with you, having fun with you, playing with you. And they don't need to possess anything they play with. They understand how fluid life is.
Are you talking about the terrible twos?
Yeah, well, beyond the age of 2, people begin to instill their ego and their needs into the child. And then the child, by the age of 3, now becomes prejudiced. By the age of 4, they won't go to a school unless it's with children of their own social background. And then we start separating people and creating the problems that we see today. And so I'm suggesting that the hero is the child that allows us to develop once again and be guided by the innocence and honesty of accepting things as they are in their natural states. For instance, if I had to be with someone in their natural state, what would that be? What would they be talking to me about? How could they be communicating with me? Would they be telling me what I want to hear or telling me what they think? And is it what they think or what their value system has taught them to think? So getting people back to being honest without being conditionally honest is a very exciting and exhilarating thing. And that's one step in this hero's journey. And so I believe everyone can be a hero, and everybody can be healthy, and everybody can be healed. I absolutely believe that. But they have to decide for that on themselves. You can't force it on them. You can't push a rope up a hill. By the way, let me mention that for those in the audience who might be interested, in June, I should say, June 23rd to July 1st, I'm going to do a sleepaway at a ranch down in Texas, where I'm going to have some people go through a whole detox, a guided detox, where they cleanse the body, get them on the right kind of cleansing program, and also help them with a lot of the emotional problems. And I do this once a year for a very small number of people because I do it myself. I go on a whole cleansing program to rejuvenate and cleanse the liver and the kidneys and the brain, and it's in a very spiritual and very positive place with a unconditional, just good environment. So if I only have, I think, 2 or 3 people spaces left, if any of the audience is interested, I'll give them a number in New York. They can call my office at 212-799-1246, and they can get some information on that. That's 212-799-1246. And it'd be kind of fun to have a few of the people, join me down there and help get their lives and their health turned around.
Now, this is called a sleepaway?
Well, I've done this for 20 years, and it's actually a detoxification rebuilding health. It helps people get off caffeine and sugar and animal proteins. It helps them get on a healthy diet. It helps them understand the use of herbs and nutrients in building the immune system. It guides them in stress management, everything from Qigong to Tai Chi. I have people like Sean Bhatnagar come in from India to show chakra rebalancing. I have workshops on body therapy, plus exercising, and everything on both body and mind that can help a person at least get conscious of who they can be when they decide to get healthy and become the architect of it. What I do is simply try to be there as a catalyst for change, of giving some insight and direction in how they can get themselves away from a disease model into a healthy model, and so they can lose weight and feel good and get cleansed and not want to put anything back in the body that doesn't honor the body or the mind, for that matter. And that's what it's about.
And that's going to be taking place in Texas from June 23rd to July 1st.
Yeah, it's 1 week, and it's on a beautiful, magnificent ranch that's a very... the Native Americans come there and do sweat lodges, and we'll be doing a sweat lodge too. And a lot of time just to be with the petting animals in the lake, and this is the only time of the whole year it's used. It's only used for one week a year.
Is this just for sick people or just for
No, it's not
well
for
people?
sick people. This is not about disease. This is about for anybody who wants to be healthier. I like to work with people who want to be as healthy as they can be as a human being. Example, last night I finished a 1.5-year study. 1.5 years. 75% of the people made it that whole time. I had people's cholesterol drop 110 points with no drugs. I had people's triglycerides, and by the way, I did this for free for these people. There was no charge for anything. I do all my work in BAI and everything I do. 80% of all the stuff I do, I don't charge for. In fact, in having counseled over 36,000 people, I've never charged 1 penny, not 1 nickel, not 1 cent. People say, well, gee whiz, why didn't you do that? You're the most famous nutritionist in the world. You could charge $400, $500 an hour. Well, yeah, I could charge more. But why would I need to? If I have a gift and knowledge, why can't I give it away? Who says that everything has to be based upon the commercial value of it? Then I'm no different than the existing paradigm. I'm not opposed to making money. I make documentaries. I've done 60 documentaries. I have to earn money, and I do. My books sell, my workshops sell, my lectures, though half my lectures I do for free, but I've never charged my individual counseling, ever, nor all the other public things that I do as a public service, daily, for 20 years on BAI. And I just wished other people would give 80% of their time. I wished every doctor would give 1 day a week to treat the poor, or people can't afford their service. I wish lawyers would give 2 days a week, pro bono, on causes and cases that are essential. I wish people would do this. I wish that every person that was involved would set up a fund on Wall Street. For every dollar they make, they would, for their firm, they would give 10% of that to groups that could really use it. I wish people were more idealistic, but they're not at this point. That doesn't mean they can't become that, and some do every day, but it's through their own evolution. So what I like to do is I like to get people like I did in this group and give all these sick people. I had people with arthritis, fatigue, and overweight. I selected 3 groups and a healthy group, and they had to have medical verification. They had to go to their doctor, get their medical checkups, blood workups done, a whole bunch of blood chemistry, and then they started on a program. And the program was a very specific diet, very, very good diet, more calories than what they would ever have eaten, and they lost weight. It was different kinds of foods. Well, I didn't treat anyone for disease. Instead, the theory was, if you can take a person who is ideally healthy, and what they're doing, will that help a person who is sick? Well, sure enough, all those sick people got well. I filmed it, too. I had a professional film crew there last night, and we filmed all their comments and their blood chemistry. Now, that's hard scientific data. When you take a person that was at 380 on their cholesterol, now they're at 200. When you take people whose triglycerides were 900, now they're 100. And I mean person after person saying that they now only sleep 5 hours a night where they slept 8, and they have more energy, and they don't have fatigue, and their Epstein-Barr viruses are normal. Their hepatitis enzyme levels in the liver are normal. Where before they had chronic flu, and they would run fevers. None of that now. And were they given drugs? No. Were they given a special program for their illness? No. They were given the principles of wellness. Harry Beale is 87. When I did this first program, of which this one I just finished was the original model 5 years ago, Harry Beale, or 4 years ago, Harry Beale was 83, 84. And he came to this sleepaway I had then out in New Jersey. I had a home in New Jersey, and I'd open my home once a year, and we went for a walk, and he couldn't walk. He had emphysema, he had prostate cancer, he had advanced occlusion of the arteries, atherosclerosis, he had crippling arthritis, he couldn't take notes, he had to have a tape recorder, and we went to walk, power walk, and he could only walk 3 steps. And he looked at me and he said, with these very sad eyes, he said, Gary, he said, I'm so tired and I'm so sick, I just wished I would die. And I said, Harry, you don't want to die, you wouldn't come out here. I said, how healthy do you want to be, Harry? He said, I don't know what you mean. I said, well, if you could be as healthy as you could be, how healthy would that be? He said, well, I'd love to be able to walk a marathon. I said, good. Okay, then you'll do it. He says, how can I do it, Gary? I can't walk 2 steps. My vision's gone. I says, Harry, that's now. You tell me how healthy you want to be, and I'll help you become that healthy. So we went back inside, and I sat down, and I helped Harry create a health program. And it was radical. And he said, Gary, he said, I can't. I said, hold on, Harry. The moment you say you can't, you won't. You want my help? It starts with I will. Well, begrudgingly, he did. Today, Harry Beale can go out and walk a marathon. Harry Beale has no disease in his body. Arthritis, heart disease, prostate, lungs, all normal. More importantly, Harry Beale, nearing 90, is probably the healthiest man I know of in America his age, because he chose to set a standard and then meet it. He went through all the superimposed values that society said, and he went by the basic 4 food group. He went by, take 30 milligrams of vitamin E. He went by all that. He no longer is acting his age, because in our society, act your age and you die. Harry's only one of many people. This year, Sam Skinner, age 53. I was just with Sam also at the meeting last night. Sam won the Outstanding Track and Field Metropolitan Athletic Congress Athlete of the Year. He's 53, and he's able to do a 4-minute mile. And he ran marathons. He doesn't have a white hair in his head, doesn't have a wrinkle on his face. He has the body of an 18-year-old Olympian. Thelma Wilson, 67. Thelma was the Outstanding Track and Field Woman Athlete in America this year. There was no woman who did better. These are not based upon popularity, it's results. Thelma has the body of a 19-year-old woman. I repeat, she has the body of a 19-year-old woman. She is 67. Thelma Wilson set records in the Houston Marathon. How did she go from just 5 years ago being sick and overweight and out of shape, a minority single woman school teacher, to being a dynamic, vivacious, engaging, healthy person? She chose it. I can name you 33 people who today have reversed their aging process, and not by the super silliest, stupid things that they do at some of these institutes. My God, those rat experiments, hey, get a life. I did that stuff in the 1970s. These people talking about gerontology. Well, if you fast a rat every other day, they will, gain 10% extra lifespan, and if you give them some antioxidants. Well, what kind of antioxidant? Where are you at, Jack? You're 25 years behind. 25 years behind. Why don't you look at what grape skin extract will do? You haven't even heard the concept in our society as a physician. Why? Because you're talking about what you're doing at UCLA in your gerontology lab there. I'm talking about giving someone 50,000 milligrams of a nutrient that will make a difference and stop the free radical activity for hours in their body.
You talking about pycnogenol?
No.
That's grape seed.
No, not even those two. I'm talking about nutrients people aren't even aware exist that are out there. Because, again, if you're not afraid to take risks and seek where no one else has looked, you're going to find things. I went down to the Peruvian rainforest and found herbs that they're using to treat cancer, and successfully so. I went to Brazil. I've gone all over the world because my idea is, hey, if there's someone doing something, I want to know how they're doing it. And so what I did was I used one model to improve, and each time I do these study groups, I get greater insights, but I take hard medical data, so at the end the person has both the subjective, how they feel, and how they look. And you ought to see the pictures. You ought to see people who don't have wrinkles on their skin anymore, people who had thinning hair who now have full heads of hair. Last night I went around the room. My hair's so thick I got to cut it once a week. And I showed them all this new hair growth, and I pulled back my hair, and I said, take a look there. And then they looked at their hair, and they couldn't see any new hair growth on their heads. And I said, there's no secret to this. Flood your body with chlorophyll. And so you start seeing how integrated things are, but it's not a bran muffin. Yeah, Gary, I took my bran muffin. I'm doing my health thing, but don't ask me to do any more than that. Well, you take your bran muffin, yeah, but you're still having your coffee, you're having your bacon, you're having your eggs, you're having your sugar, you're having your hamburgers. Yeah, but I took my bran muffin. Well, good. That doesn't mean anything. When you're going to make change, don't make it upon the rules of which someone else told you are permissible. And that's what I do. I guide people through change that's really dynamic. I mean dynamic. I don't ever treat disease. I promote the concept of wellness. The idea is look for the person who is most healthy and see what they've done to be there, because it's not by accident the person's healthy. And symptoms are not the criteria. You could be processing 60 or 70 diseases and show no symptoms for years. Wellness, however, can be measured by a quality, a biochemical, biomagnetic, bioelectric, emotional, intellectual, creative energies. So I look at the totality of the person that's well and use that as a model. And I've taken models from all over the world and collectively assimilated them. I went out and studied what the farmer does in northern Italy, in Spain, in France, and in the Isles. I went down and spent time with the bush doctors I want to see what are they doing. And this is how I integrate systems, some from here and some from there. So when I take this week away, it's not to help people treat their disease. I'm not a physician. What I do is promote wellness so they can see how they promoted their disease, how to reverse the process, how to be healthier than they've ever been in their life, happier than they've ever been in their life, more balanced and fulfilled, how to break many of the cult values that they hold and are attracted to, how not to be a Werner Erhard-est, how not to be in the form, how not to be controlled by any of the isms. So that's what it's about.
And now, your latest book, you've taken your research into the, I hesitate to call it the mental health field, but into the mind, into what we would call the mental health field.
Yeah, I took the whole idea of nutrition and showed that nutrition and our environment directly affect our behavior, from candida to chronic fatigue, from depression to eating disorders, from food allergies to heavy metal toxicity, from hypoglycemia to PMS and schizophrenia. They are all connected. And I show the protocols to get yourself rebalanced. One of my friends is a physician who is a neurologist, who is a professor at Mount Sinai, who is as orthodox as you get. And we were having dinner. He said he had to get down to Florida. I said, why? He said, well, he had to put his mother in a nursing home. I said, why? Well, she's got dementia. She's lost it. She doesn't recognize me or my brother. And I said, have you rehydrated her brain? He said, what do you mean? Did you give her N-acetylcysteine? Did you give her glutamine? Did you give her ginkgo? No. Why should I? Well, between the ages of 20 and 70, the brain can shrink substantially from dehydration. And senior citizens don't drink enough. Rehydrate her with cold water every hour. Give her specific nutrients. He did. 3 days later, she became more normal. 2 weeks later, she was totally normal. Today, 2 years later, she's just as normal as ever. He changed the practice of his medicine. Now he's into complementary medicine. It took his own mother and that example for him to change his paradigm. You know, people change for different reasons. But now, and he's in the book, Nutrition in the Mind. That story's in the book.
There are quite a few conditions that are discussed in Nutrition in the Mind that are generally regarded as hopeless, and also difficulties which one would generally never approach nutritionally. Tardive dyskinesia, alcoholism. You have.
You could give a person with alcoholism ozone, vitamin C with glutathione and glyceric acid, which is licorice root, high B complex and zinc, magnesium chloride. You can give all this in an IV drip on a protocol 3 days a week, and I've seen those livers rejuvenate. I've seen alcoholics break their entire addiction needs and cravings for alcohol and restore the vitality of their system, repairing their digestive system, restabilizing their pancreatic enzymes, because alcoholics are almost universally hypoglycemic because of the enormous amount of sugar, 9 calories per gram of sugar and alcohol. And I've seen all this done time and time and time again. I've seen people get off cocaine using holistic protocols. People think they have to go to the Betty Ford Clinic and scrub toilet bowls with toothbrushes. That's nonsense. You know, that's a part of the paradigm problem. I can see people detoxed all the time. And anyhow, there is no problem for me to deal with these issues. It may be for the other people. Maybe they don't have treatments that work, but there are treatments that work. And so if they're willing to take a risk and willing to take a chance, look outside their existing paradigms, and then they can see things, including vitamin E for tardive dyskinesia in high doses with magnesium and calcium at about 500 milligrams elemental calcium. That's about 3,000 milligrams calcium complex. I've seen it help tardive dyskinesia. So it's true. One person's saying there is no reality that I can find that it can help tardive. He's right. His reality prevents that from being seen, but that doesn't mean that there's not a truth that's different than theirs that also helps it.
Also, I was amazed to see autism listed.
You've got a doctor right there in California, Dr. Bernard Rimland, a really outstanding physician, and he has done a lot of work with autistic children using holistic models. I've used a lot of magnetic therapy in studying autism, and we have, once I create a protocol, then I give it to different physicians, and if they feel it reasonable, they will use it, since these are non-toxic and non-invasive. And I've seen autistic children improve tremendously using complementary health issues. Again, the specific protocols requires specifically knowing about the child, but I've seen it so many times. That is not difficult to deal with.
You also discuss another widespread difficulty, anxiety disorders and panic attacks approached with supplements.
I've seen people who will have chemical sensitivities that cause the brain to swell and will cause panic, where the panic is real, the cause is not. And so they start focusing on non-real causes, and the key is to get them to focus on what is causing the panic, and that's an imbalance. And that's not in everyone. Nothing is in everyone, but you can certainly, we've reversed enough panic disorders by stabilizing blood sugar. I've seen people that will take sugar and get panicky. They cause a gross fluctuation in their blood sugar, and when they have a gross fluctuation, that can manifest in those sensitive people as panic disorders.
I don't know if I should even mention insomnia, because if we turn people on to relief from insomnia, then I may lose some listeners. But it is there.
Well, some people have to work at night, and some people naturally feel more energized at night. They're in a active catabolic state, and versus in the morning when we're more anabolic. In fact, from 4 o'clock on, we become highly anabolic, and therefore our brains actually are clear, and we have more energy, assuming that our adrenals are not dysfunctional and our thyroid is not dysfunctional, which they frequently are, which is one of the reasons people feel they have to have coffee to get up in the morning. They don't if they got their thyroid checked by taking their temperature for 3 straight days under their armpit using an oral thermometer for 10 minutes, laying horizontal on a bed. They put the thermometer the night before on the bedside table, shake it out, put it under their arm. When they wake up in the morning, take their temperature. If it's under 97.5, the likelihood is they have underactive thyroid or hypothyroidism, and that can be corrected. And that's not difficult. And then suddenly they have all this energy. And by the way, depression is the number one problem with low thyroid. And so you correct the thyroid, you suddenly don't have the depression anymore. I had 2 women last night came up, said that when they saw their thyroid was underactive, they started taking the Armour thyroid granules. Within a period of weeks, their emotions were normal. Also, cold hands and cold feet, feeling overall cold went away. Thinning of the eyebrows and the hair went away. So, this is all real. It exists. I deal with it every day. And I see we're coming up almost at 9, and we've been on not too bad, 2 hours and 45 minutes. Doesn't seem like it's that long, does it?
That's pretty good for a half-an-hour interview.
Yeah.
And we hardly got to the topic, but it was incredible. And I'm gonna have fun rebroadcasting this and just sitting back and listening. But I do want to mention this. What I introduced is a very important book, Nutrition in the Mind, and it is available from in the bookstores, I expect, or you can call. Let's see, there was 1-800-626-4848. Is that the publisher? Can people get information on your other books?
If they can't find the book out there, they can call that number.
Okay, area 800-626-4848. You also have the one you talked about, Change Your Life Now, is it?
Yes. If they're interested in Change Your Life Now, which is the most important book I've ever written, and if they're also interested in joining me, a couple people joining me for a week at the beautiful ranch in Texas for this real change your life around and get healthy, they can call today, anytime today, at 212-799-1246. That's 212-799-1246.
Okay, and there's only like 3 spaces left. So.
That's it. There's only 3, because I only work with a small group of people, so I can get them a lot of personalized attention. I'm there working with them, and it really helps give them the confidence that they can understand. Because, as you see, I like to talk in ways that connect issues, and I do the same thing with people's health.
Well, I'm truly grateful that we have the luxury here at KPFK at night of the length or the breadth of time that allows a talk like yours to be delivered without interruption for 2 hours and 45 minutes or so. I really appreciate the freedom that we have to be able to make that exploration at a moment's notice. I had to put your homeopathic program away, but we'll get to that next week.
All right. Well, anytime you'd like to do it again. Do you ever take calls from the audience?
Yes, I do. And we even have the facility to take calls when you're on the phone, and we will do that.
Okay.
Soon.
Good.
I'll give you a call.
Yeah, I'd like to talk with people in the audience out there and see what issues they're having to deal with, and see if I can't give them possibly some insight.
Okay, well, we'll make those arrangements very soon. I'll call you in very shortly, a couple of days or so.
Good. Well, I really appreciate the opportunity. It's very rare that you have a chance in the media to spend almost 3 hours talking with someone without commercials and just a stream of consciousness, just a free flow of thoughts. But I'm happy that I did have this opportunity, and all the best to your audience. And I know that there are a lot of conscientious, positive, very balanced people listening, and all the more power to you.
Okay, well, thank you, Gary. You are a phenomenon generally and in Pacifica and in the health freedom movement, and I'm really grateful that you're around, and I guess you'll be around for quite a while.
Hope so.
Okay.
Take care.
Good night.
Bye.
This is KPFK Los Angeles, and it is May 10th, 1995. We have been talking with Gary Null.